"Countryman, look for a cheaper rate," and he replies, "I didn't come to rent, I came to buy." Silas Sterling never imagined that day would change everything. The 68-year-old man had faced tough situations throughout his life, but nothing prepared him for the humiliation he was about to endure. When Silas walked through the revolving doors of the majestic Regency, he felt the weight of every gaze upon him. The worn-out straw hat shielding his head from the harsh sun of rural Pennsylvania bore the marks of years of work on the farm, and the apron stained with red dirt betrayed that this man didn't belong to that world of marble and crystal chandeliers. "Good afternoon," said Silas, approaching the reception desk with weary steps. The receptionist lifted her eyes from the computer screen and couldn't hide her surprise. Piper Carter was only 23 and had been working there for 6 months. Even accustomed to all kinds of guests, she had never seen anyone like that gentleman entering the main lobby. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" she asked, maintaining professional politeness. "Miss, I'm looking for a place to stay a few days here in the city. I wanted to know if you have a more affordable rate, you know." Before Piper could answer, a sharp voice echoed through the lobby. "What's going on here?" Preston Thorne was 35 and had been manager of the Majestic for 3 years. Tall, dark hair slicked back with too much gel, a flawless designer suit, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He had built his career by stepping on whoever was necessary, and he made a point of showing superiority in every gesture. "Mr. Preston, this gentleman is interested in a rate," explained Piper, sensing the mood shift. Preston walked to the desk with calculated steps, sizing Silas up from head to toe. The smile that appeared on his lips held nothing kind. "A rate?" he repeated, letting each syllable hang in the air. "My good man, I think you've mistaken this establishment." Silas stood firm, even as the discomfort grew. There was something in that younger man's eyes that told him trouble was coming. "No mistake, mister. I came to the right address, just wanted to know the prices." "The prices?" Preston let out a short, loud laugh, making some guests in the lobby turn to watch. "Sir, our rates start at $1,200. I don't think that's quite what you're looking for." "$1,200? Silas scratched his graying beard. "That's steep, but it might do." Preston's laugh grew louder, drawing more attention. 2 elegant couples waiting for the elevator stopped to watch the scene. An elderly woman with white hair, sitting in a velvet armchair near the reception, lowered the magazine she was reading. "Sir, with all due respect," said Preston, opening his arms theatrically, "the Majestic Regency is a 5-star establishment. Our guests include businessmen, politicians, international artists. It's no place for—" He paused dramatically, looking at Silas's dirty apron. "For folks who work on the farm." Piper felt her face burn with second-hand embarrassment. She opened her mouth to intervene, but Preston shot her a warning look. "Mister, I know my clothes aren't the best," began Silas calmly, "but I have money. I just wanted a decent place to spend a few days." "Money?" Preston crossed his arms, clearly enjoying himself. Right. And let me guess, you're going to pay with what? Farm fresh chicken? A few corn sacks?" Laughter now came from different parts of the lobby. The couple near the elevator couldn't hold back. Even some employees, afraid of displeasing the manager, offered nervous smiles. Silas took a deep breath. This wasn't new to him. For his entire life, he had faced the prejudice of those who thought dirty clothes meant a dirty character. But he had learned over the years that patience was his best ally. "Actually, young man," he said, keeping his voice steady, "I didn't come here to rent a room." Preston raised an eyebrow, still smiling. No, I came to buy." The silence that settled was so deep you could hear the faint hum of the central air conditioning. Preston blinked several times, as if processing what he'd just heard. "Buy," he repeated, amusement starting to give way to confusion. "That's right. Buy the hotel." Preston's laughter returned, but this time it sounded forced, nervous. "You must be joking, right? Is this some kind of prank?" Silas pulled a yellowed, crumpled envelope from his apron pocket, with slow gestures. Typical of someone who had spent a lifetime doing work that required precision, he opened it and pulled out some folded papers. "I scheduled a meeting with a broker for today, 3 in the afternoon. I said I wanted to see the hotel before closing the deal. Preston took the papers dismissively, still convinced this was some kind of misunderstanding. His eyes ran over the first few lines and slowly, the color began to drain from his face. They were bank statements, and the numbers printed there had a lot of zeros. This has to be forged, Preston muttered, but his voice lost all conviction. You can call the bank and check if you want, Silas said simply. The manager there knows my family well. Piper watched everything with wide eyes. She had witnessed Preston humiliate many people over the months, but she had never seen the tables turn on him like this. Preston cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. But before he could say anything, the revolving doors opened again and two women walked in. Both wore elegant black suits, one carrying an executive leather briefcase, and they had that air of professionalism that Preston recognized and immediately respected. "Good afternoon," said the taller of the two, her brown hair tied in an impeccable bun. "We're looking for Mr. Silas Sterling." "That's me," the old man replied, nodding discreetly. The two women walked over to him with genuine smiles. "Dad, we're a bit early," said the one with the bun, kissing Silas's cheek affectionately. "Dad?" Preston felt the ground give way beneath his feet. The second woman, with shorter hair and thin-rimmed glasses, also greeted Silas warmly, before turning her attention to the manager. "You must be the hotel manager," she said, extending her hand professionally. "My name is Meredith Sterling. I have a degree in hotel management from Ithaca University in Switzerland. This is my sister Sloane, who graduated in business management." Preston shook her hand mechanically, still processing the information. "And our youngest sister, Prudence, couldn't make it today," Meredith continued. "She's finishing her master's degree in international gastronomy in Napa Valley. 3 daughters," Preston murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "That's right," Silas confirmed, with quiet pride in his voice. "I worked my whole life to give them an education. Each one chose what they wanted to study, but they all chose well." Sloane opened her briefcase and pulled out precisely organized documents. "We spoke with the broker, Mr." She glanced at the name tag on Preston's chest. "Thorne. He's on his way. In the meantime, we'd like to do a preliminary inspection of the facilities if it's not too much trouble." Preston swallowed hard. The situation had completely slipped out of his control, and he knew it. But his arrogant nature wouldn't allow him to simply admit defeat. "Of course, no problem," he said, trying to sound professional. "But I should inform you that the hotel is not officially for sale." "Ah, but it is—" A new voice joined the conversation. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was a man in his 50s, thin, with deep bags under his eyes, and an expression of exhaustion that went beyond the physical. He wore an expensive suit, but it seemed too big on him, as if he had recently lost weight. "Mr. Arthur." Preston paled even more. Arthur Harrison was the owner of the majestic Regency. Or rather, he was the heir who had taken over the family business after his father's death 3 years earlier. And things were not going well. "Mr. Sterling?" Arthur walked directly up to Silas, completely ignoring Preston. "I received the broker's contact. Nice to meet you." They shook hands. There was something desperate in Arthur's eyes that Silas recognized immediately. It was the same desperation he had seen in his own reflection many years ago, when his small farm in rural Pennsylvania was about to be foreclosed by the bank. "The pleasure is mine," replied Silas. "Please, let's go to my office." "We can talk more privately," suggested Arthur, already pointing the way. "Actually," Meredith interjected, "before any negotiations, we'd like to see the facilities. It's standard procedure." Arthur hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Of course. Preston, please be so kind as to show our guests around the hotel." The expression on Preston's face was a mix of suppressed anger and humiliation. He had mocked that man minutes ago, and now he was being forced to treat him as a potential buyer, worse, as his potential future boss. "It will be a pleasure," he lied through clenched teeth. As the group prepared for the hotel tour, Piper watched everything from her position behind the counter. Part of her wanted to smile at the turn of events, but another part was genuinely worried. She knew Preston well enough to know that men like him didn't forget humiliations. and she had witnessed it all. The group began to walk through the main lobby. Preston, regaining some composure, took on his role as guide with the ease of someone who had done it hundreds of times. The majestic Regency was founded in 1952, he began, his voice returning to a professional and cold tone, by the Harrison family. It has 240 rooms, 3 restaurants, 2 bars, a full spa, and event halls that can accommodate up to 500 people. Sloane was taking notes on a tablet as they walked. Meredith observed every detail of the facilities with critical, trained eyes. Silas followed in silence, his eyes also catching things Preston would never imagine he would notice, like the fact that the ornamental plants in the lobby were wilted, poorly cared for, or that the crystal chandeliers, though still impressive, had a thin layer of dust that only someone used to meticulous cleaning work would notice. Small signs that maintenance was being neglected. "The presidential suites are on the top floor," continued Preston, leading the group to the elevator. "There are 4 of them, each with a panoramic view of the city." When they entered the elevator, the space became tight. Silas found himself standing next to Preston and could feel the tension radiating from the younger man. It was palpable, almost physical. "Mr. Thorne," said Meredith, breaking the silence as they went up, "how long have you been working at this hotel?" 3 years as manager," replied Preston, trying to puff out his chest with pride. "Before that, I worked at luxury hotels in other major cities. And what is the current occupancy rate of the hotel?" The question caught Preston off guard. He blinked several times before answering. "It varies depending on the season, of course. An annual average will do," insisted Meredith, politely but firmly. "About 65%. Sloane and Meredith exchanged a glance. For a 5-star hotel in New York City, that was low, very low. "And the profit margin?" asked Sloane without lifting her eyes from the tablet. That's confidential information only Mr. Arthur can provide." "Of course," Meredith agreed, but her tone made it clear that the evasion already told her plenty. The elevator doors opened on the 15th floor. The hallway was wide, with dark red carpet and wall sconces trying to mimic antique chandeliers, but Silas noticed that several of them were burned out. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to it. Preston led them to one of the presidential suites. With a dramatic gesture, he opened the double doors of carved wood. "The Sovereign Suite," he announced. The suite was indeed impressive. A spacious living room, a bedroom with a king-size bed, a marble bathroom with a whirlpool tub, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the city. But again, the group's trained eyes caught the details Preston hoped they'd overlook. The silk curtain had a small tear poorly mended. The Persian rug, though genuine and expensive, showed excessive wear in certain areas, indicating a lack of proper rotation. And there was a faint, almost imperceptible smell of mildew coming from the air conditioning. Meredith walked to the window and stared at the city for a long moment. Silas joined her, placing a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. "So, daughter, what do you think?" Meredith lowered her voice so only he could hear. "The place has potential, Dad, a lot of potential, but it's being mismanaged. The signs are all there." "I noticed too," Silas murmured. "The question is it worth trying to save?" "That depends on the price," she replied, always practical, "and on how much we're willing to invest in renovations." Sloane joined them at the window, leaving Preston uncomfortable on the other side of the room. "I need to talk to the staff," she said quietly. "I want to know what the real work environment is like, not the official version." "Good idea," Silas agreed. "Happy people do better work." Preston, feeling left out of the private conversation, cleared his throat loudly. "If you've seen enough of this suite, I can show you the others." "That won't be necessary," Meredith replied, turning to him. "We'd like to see the service areas. Kitchen, laundry, storage." Preston's expression tightened even more. He wasn't used to buyers who wanted to see the backstage. Usually, investors only cared about the prime areas, the spaces that generated direct profit. "The service areas?" he repeated, as if he hadn't understood. Yes, Sloane confirmed. They're essential for evaluating the operation as a whole. Well, certainly. Though I must warn you, they're not the most pleasant places to visit. I worked in hotel kitchens during my undergrad, Meredith said with a small smile. I don't mind service areas. Without a choice, Preston led them back to the elevator. This time they went down to the basement, where the hotel's operational guts were. The doors opened to reveal a hallway very different from the upper floors. Exposed concrete, fluorescent lighting, and a smell of cleaning products mixed with food. Immediately they heard voices coming from one of the rooms. I can't take this anymore, Gladys. It's already 3 months of unpaid wages. I know. But what can we do? If we leave now, we won't find another job quickly. And at least here they still serve meals. Preston quickened his pace, trying to pass quickly by the ajar door, but Silas stopped. He slowly pushed the door open, revealing what seemed to be a staff break room. 5 women in maid uniforms were seated around an old table, some with open lunchboxes. "Excuse me," said Silas, stepping in without asking Mr. Preston for permission. The maid stood up quickly, startled. "Sir, this area is restricted," Mr. Preston began, but Silas completely ignored him. "Good morning, ladies. Forgive the intrusion, but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. Is it true the wages are late?" The women looked at Mr. Preston with evident fear. None of them dared to answer. "I asked a question," Silas insisted, but his voice was gentle, not threatening. "And I'm not going to cause trouble for anyone. I just want to know the truth." It was the oldest of the group who finally spoke. She must have been about 60, grey hair tied in a tight bun, calloused hands that betrayed decades of hard work. 3 months, sir," she said, her voice trembling. "They say it's a supplier issue, that the money will come in soon, but Mrs. Gladys, Mr. Preston tried to intervene. "You shouldn't be discussing internal matters with strangers." "Strangers?" Silas turned to Mr. Preston with an expression that made the manager step back. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something worse. It was disappointment. "These ladies work honestly, and you have the nerve to let their wages fall behind by 3 months? I'm not responsible for the payments," Mr. Preston defended himself. "That's a decision for the finance board." "But you're the manager. Didn't you fight for them? Didn't you pressure the board?" Mr. Preston's silence was answer enough. Meredith entered the room and immediately went over to the women. "How many employees are in the same situation?" "Almost everyone working in the service areas," answered another maid, younger. "Only those at the front desk and in the restaurants are getting paid on time. They say it's because they're the face of the hotel and can't appear unhappy in front of the guests." Sloane was furiously taking notes on her tablet. Silas watched everything with a growing sadness in his chest. This was exactly the kind of injustice he hated most. Honest, hard-working people being exploited by those with power. "Mrs. Gladys," he said, turning his attention back to the older woman, "how long have you worked here?" 32 years, sir. 32 years. She had dedicated most of her adult life to that place, and now she was being treated as if she were disposable. "And the other ladies?" Each one answered in turn. The newest had been there 7 years. The one with the least time had started 4 years ago, all of them with stories of dedication, of arriving early and leaving late, of doing more than necessary because they cared about the hotel. "Do you like working here?" Silas asked. "We used to," Gladys corrected with bitterness. "It was different before. Old Mr. Arthur, the current owner's father, he took care of us. He knew every employee's name, asked about our families. When my daughter was born, he gave me an extra week of paid leave, said a mother needed to be with her baby. But after he left..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Mr. Preston was visibly uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "If you're done here, we still have many areas to visit," he said, eager to leave. "Just one more question," said Sloane, looking directly at Gladys. "Have you sought out any kind of representation, union lawyer, and risk being fired?" Gladys let out a humorless laugh. "I've seen what happens to people who complain here." Esther, who worked in the laundry, questioned the late wages and was let go that same week. They made up that she was stealing towels. "That's a serious accusation," said Mr. Preston, his face turning red. "Esther was let go for proven cause." "Proven by whom? By you?" Gladys looked at him with a courage she didn't seem to have moments ago. "We all know it was a setup, and we also know you were the one behind it, because she had the audacity to go straight to Mr. Arthur and speak with him. Silas and his daughters absorbed every word. The situation was worse than they had imagined. It wasn't just financial mismanagement, it was an abuse of power, deliberate exploitation." "Ladies," said Silas, and something in his voice made everyone look at him closely. "Thank you very much for your honesty. Rest assured this information will be very useful." After they left the room, the group continued the tour in heavy silence. They visited the kitchen, where they found dented pots and equipment in need of repair. The laundry room had old machines running on their last legs, with piles of clothes because there weren't enough hands to keep up with the work, since half the staff had been let go to cut costs. In the supply room, they discovered many basic items were missing because the hotel had switched suppliers, trading small local businesses for large distributors that offered lower prices but questionable quality and irregular deliveries. "The bread we serve now isn't even half as good as what we used to buy from Otis' local bakery," commented the head chef, a 50-year-old heavy-set man named Frank. "But the new supplier charges 40% less, so we were forced to switch." "And Mr. Otis?" asked Silas. "What happened to him?" Frank sighed, stirring a pot of sauce on the industrial stove. "I don't really know. I heard he was counting on the hotel contract to stay afloat. When they cancelled it, he had to let his employees go. I think he's trying to sell the bakery." Silas made a mental note. Another victim of poor management. When they finally finished the tour, it was almost 6 in the evening. The realtor had arrived an hour ago and was waiting in Arthur's office along with the hotel owner. Preston led the group there, clearly relieved this ordeal was coming to an end. But for him, the worst was yet to come. Arthur's office was large, with mahogany furniture and a bookshelf full of books that seemed never to have been opened. Arthur himself sat behind the desk, looking as if he had aged 10 years since they saw him in the lobby. The realtor, an effusive 40-year-old man named Glenn, stood up immediately when he saw them enter. "Mr. Silas, finally!" He shook the old man's hand with enthusiasm. "I hope you liked what you saw." "I saw a lot," Silas replied ambiguously. "Well," said Arthur, pointing to the chairs, "shall we discuss business?" Everyone sat down. Preston remained standing near the door, unsure whether to stay or leave. "Preston," Arthur called, "you may leave. This is a private meeting." For the first time since Silas had met him, Preston seemed genuinely hurt. He nodded stiffly and left, closing the door a bit harder than necessary. "I apologize for him," said Arthur, rubbing his temples as if he had a headache. "Preston has his qualities, but subtlety isn't one of them." "Subtlety," Silas repeated in a dry tone. "That's an interesting word to choose." Arthur looked at him closely, trying to decipher the man before him. "Mr. Silas, I'll be straightforward with you because I think you deserve honesty. This hotel is in trouble, big trouble. My father was a genius at hotel management, but I didn't inherit his talent. I tried, but every decision I made seemed to make things worse." "How do you mean worse?" asked Meredith, opening a notebook. Arthur took a deep breath before answering. "When my father passed away, he left the hotel with a small debt. Nothing too serious. But I thought I could modernize everything, attract a younger, more upscale crowd. I invested in expensive renovations, changed the management system, brought Preston in from New York City thinking he knew what he was doing. The result? The renovations are only half done because the money ran out. The new management system is a bureaucratic nightmare, and Preston, well, you saw how he treats people." "And the debts?" asked Sloane, always direct. $6 million. Between suppliers, back wages, bank loan. Arthur buried his face in his hands. "I failed. I failed my father's legacy. I failed the employees he loved so much. I failed everyone." There was something genuine in his desperation that touched Silas. He recognized a man who had made mistakes, not out of malice but out of incompetence, and perhaps trying to carry too heavy a burden alone. "And why sell?" asked Silas. "Why not try to reorganize, take on a partner?" "I've tried." Arthur let out a bitter laugh. "Nobody wants to partner up with a sinking ship, and I don't have the strength to fight anymore. Better to sell for a fair price to someone who can actually do something with this place than to let it all sink completely." Pedro, the broker, cleared his throat. "Mr. Arthur requested a hotel appraisal. Considering the debts and the current state, we arrived at a market value of $8 million. $8 million for a hotel with $6 million in debts?" Sloane raised her eyebrows. "That leaves only $2 million in equity." "True," agreed Pedro, "but consider the prime location, the established brand, the growth potential." Meredith interrupted gently. "Mr. Arthur, with all due respect, we saw the hotel. We saw the neglected facilities. We spoke with demoralized employees. We observed equipment in need of replacement. $8 million is overpriced." "Then make a counteroffer," said Arthur, without the energy to argue. Silas, who had remained quiet during the financial discussion, finally spoke. "Before we talk numbers, I need to know one thing. Why did you hire Preston?" The question caught Arthur off guard. He had an impressive resume. He worked at luxury hotels in New York City, Chicago, even some time abroad. He brought modern ideas about management and marketing. "And you didn't notice how he treats people?" Arthur was silent for a long moment. I was so focused on saving the hotel that I didn't pay attention to what was happening behind the scenes. Preston was always polite to me. The numbers he presented seemed good. The guests didn't complain." "The guests he let in," corrected Silas. "Because folks like me who show up with dirty clothes he sends away before they even reach the front desk." Arthur seemed to shrink even further into his chair. "I'm sorry for what happened in the lobby. If I had known—" "I'm not the one you should be apologizing to," said Silas firmly. "It's the maids who haven't gotten their pay in 3 months. It's Mr. Otis who lost the contract for the bakery. It's Esther who was falsely accused of theft." "Esther?" Arthur blinked, confused. "The woman from the laundry? Preston said there was evidence." "Preston lied," declared Silas. "She was fired because she had the courage to complain to you about the delays." Arthur's face went through several emotions: surprise, anger, and finally deep sorrow. "I really did fail, didn't I?" No one answered. The answer was too obvious to need words. Pedro, trying to salvage the meeting, returned to practical matters. "Well, gentlemen, the important thing now is to decide if there's an interest in the purchase and on what terms." Meredith and Sloane looked at their father, waiting for his decision. Silas was silent for a long moment, those tired eyes scanning the room as if he could see through the walls all the problems the hotel was hiding. "I need to think," he said finally. "This isn't a decision you make on the spot." Of course," agreed Arthur. "How much time do you need?" "Give me about 3 days. I want to run some checks, talk to more people, get a better handle on the situation." "Take your time. And Mr. Silas, regardless of your decision, thank you for your honesty today. It opened my eyes to a lot of things." They got up, shook hands, and Silas's group left the room. When they stepped out, they found Preston in the hallway, clearly trying to look busy with papers but obviously waiting. "All done?" he asked, unable to hide his curiosity. "We're done," Meredith replied coldly. "And?" Preston couldn't help himself. "Is there going to be a sale?" "That's none of your business," Sloane said, brushing past him. Silas stopped beside Preston. For a moment the two men looked at each other. There were worlds of difference between them, in age, experience, values. But it was Preston who looked away first. "Son," Silas said quietly, "you've got a lot to learn about respect." And then he walked on, leaving Preston alone in the hallway. When they left the hotel, the sun was already setting, painting the New York City sky in shades of orange and pink. Silas stopped on the sidewalk, breathing in the city air that was so different from the pure country air he knew. "So, Dad," Meredith asked, "what do you think?" "I think that place has a lot of pain," he answered. "A lot of people suffering, a lot of things broken, but I also think it can be fixed. The question is whether we're willing to do the work it takes." "It won't be easy," Sloane observed. 6 million in debt, demoralized employees, old equipment, and a troublesome manager who'll fight any change, added Meredith. Silas smiled, a tired but not defeated smile. Girls, when was anything worth doing easy? They laughed, recognizing the philosophy their father had taught them since they were small. Nothing of value comes without effort. Let's get dinner, Silas said, and tomorrow we start working for real. They walked down the busy street, an old man in clothes stained with dirt and two elegant women in suits, an unlikely trio that made people turn their heads, but none of the three cared. Over the next 3 days, Silas and his daughters worked tirelessly. Meredith dove into the hotel's accounting books that Arthur had made available, mapping out every expense, every revenue stream, every debt. What she found confirmed and deepened her initial suspicions. The debts weren't just with suppliers and banks. There were also labor lawsuits from employees fired without cause, accumulated fines for safety regulation violations, and even back taxes. The hole was even deeper than the admitted $6 million. Sloane, on her end, went after the people. She talked to dozens of employees, from the doorman to the head chef, the events manager to the cleaning staff. And in every conversation, a pattern emerged. The hotel had been a good place to work until 3 years ago. The change coincided with two things: the death of old Mr. Harrison and the arrival of Preston Thorne. She also tracked down former suppliers: Mr. Otis from the bakery, Mrs. Betty, who provided flowers for the hotel's arrangements, Mr. Roy, who ran a small maintenance company. They all had similar stories. Contracts abruptly cancelled, sometimes with payments still owed, replaced by big companies that offered lower prices but inferior service. What hurt most, Mr. Otis recounted, sitting in the empty bakery he was trying to sell, wasn't losing the contract. It was how they did it. 30 years supplying fresh bread every day, and they sent an email. An email! They didn't even have the decency to talk to me face to face. Who made that decision? Sloane asked, already knowing the answer but wanting confirmation. The new manager. This man Marcello, old Mr. Ferreira would never have done that. The story repeated itself with every person she interviewed. Marcello had implemented a policy of maximum efficiency that, in practice, meant cutting costs without considering the human impact. Meanwhile, Silas did something no one expected. He went back to the hotel, but not as a potential buyer. He returned as a guest. "I want one of the cheapest nightly rates you have," he said to Piper at the front desk, who was surprised to see him again. "Mr. Silas, but you don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He smiled gently. "But I want to. I want to see what it's really like to stay here as an ordinary guest." Piper checked him in at one of the hotel's cheapest rates, a small room on the 3rd floor. There was no view, the bathroom was cramped, and the decor was clearly dated. But it was clean, and that counted for a lot. During the 2 days he stayed there, Silas observed everything. How the staff interacted when they thought no one important was watching. How some guests treated the housekeepers with disdain. How Preston walked through the hotel with an air of ownership, but never stopped to actually talk to the people doing the real work. He also noticed good things. He noticed how Frank, the head chef, stayed late to ensure dinner was perfect, even with inferior ingredients. How Mrs. Gladys and her fellow housekeepers took pride in cleaning the rooms despite the overdue wages. How Piper always had a genuine smile for the guests, even when she must have been exhausted. There was dedication there. There was love for the work, even though it was mistreated and undervalued. And Silas knew that was rare, precious. On the morning of the 3rd day, he checked out and returned to the small apartment he had temporarily rented in the city. Meredith and Sloane were already there, surrounded by papers and laptops. "So," asked Meredith, "have you decided?" Silas sat down heavily on the old couch. "Before I decide anything, I need you both to be honest with me. Are you up for this? Because it's not just going to be buying a hotel. It's going to be saving a lot of people who are suffering. It's going to be hard work, a lot of headaches, a lot of problems." The two sisters looked at each other. "Dad," began Sloane, "you raised us with a philosophy. Remember what you always used to say." "I said a lot of things." Silas smiled faintly. "You said having money is worthless if you don't use it to make a difference. And there are a lot of people in that hotel who need someone to make a difference. Meredith agreed. Besides, financially, it makes sense. The hotel has problems, but it has potential. With proper management, investment in the right people, it could be profitable again. We just need to do things right. Then let's do it, decided Silas. Let's buy this hotel and show how things should be done. The next day they returned to the majestic Regency for the final meeting. Arthur, Grant the broker, and surprisingly Preston were in the room. I thought this would be a meeting with just the owner, Meredith commented upon seeing Preston. Preston is the manager, Arthur justified. I thought he should be present. Actually, said Silas, it would be better if this meeting were private. Preston opened his mouth to protest, but Arthur stopped him with a gesture. Preston, please. The manager left, but not before shooting a venomous look at Silas. With the door closed, the negotiations began. Mr. Arthur, began Meredith, we've reviewed everything, and our offer is as follows. $4 million. Arthur turned pale. $4 million? But the hotel is worth at least $8 million. It is, agreed Sloane. If it didn't have $6 million in known debts and another $2 million in liabilities we uncovered during our investigation. $2 million? Arthur seemed genuinely surprised. What liabilities? Pending labor lawsuits, accumulated fines, taxes with interest piling up. Should I continue? Arthur sank into the chair. I didn't know. Preston handles all the bureaucratic side. That's exactly the problem, said Silas. You left someone you couldn't trust in charge of the most important things. But $4 million, Arthur muttered. My father built this over 40 years. And we're going to honor that legacy, Silas promised. But you need to understand we're not just buying the hotel, we're taking on all the debts, all the problems, and we're going to need to invest a lot more to fix what's broken. How much more? At least $3 million in renovations and modernization, answered Meredith, plus another $1 million to settle back pay and rebuild relationships with local suppliers. That makes $8 million total, Arthur calculated. That's right. We're willing to invest $8 million in this hotel. 4 for you and 4 to fix what needs fixing. Or would you rather wait for someone to offer you the $8 million you think it's worth and invest nothing in improvements? Arthur was silent, processing. Glenn, the realtor, leaned in and whispered something in his ear. Glenn is reminding me that I have other offers, Arthur said finally. Do you really? Asked Sloane skeptically. Or do you have people who said they might make offers? Arthur didn't answer, and his expression said it all. Look, Silas leaned forward. I'm going to be honest with you because I think you deserve it. If you don't accept our offer, this hotel is going under. The debts will grow, the employees will leave, the guests will stop coming. In a year, maybe less, you'll have to sell for much less than $4 million. Or worse, you'll have to declare bankruptcy and lose everything. Are you threatening me? No, I'm giving you the plain truth. You said it yourself, you don't have the strength to fight anymore, and there's nothing wrong with admitting that. It's not weakness to acknowledge when something is too big for you. The weakness is in letting pride get in the way of doing the right thing. Arthur looked at that man in simple clothes and saw something he recognized. He saw wisdom earned through years of struggle, of mistakes and successes, of a life lived with purpose. If I sell to you, Arthur said slowly, what will happen to the employees? No one will be fired, Silas promised. On the contrary, we'll pay all the back wages. We'll give raises to those who deserve them. We'll create an environment where people want to work. And Preston? The 3 visitors exchanged glances. About that? We need to talk, said Meredith. Half an hour later, the terms were settled. $4 million for the hotel, with the condition that Silas would take on all the debts and keep all the employees. The contract would be signed in a week, enough time for the lawyers to prepare everything. When they left the room, they found Preston waiting in the hallway again. This time, he didn't try to hide it. So? He asked directly. We made a deal, Silas replied. Preston's expression went through several stages. First disbelief, then anger, finally a mask of forced professionalism. Congratulations, he said through clenched teeth. I suppose this means changes in management. Many changes, Meredith confirmed, and I suppose I'll be looking for a new job. Silas stopped and looked at the man who had humiliated him days before. That depends. Depends? It depends on you. You can stay if you want, but not as manager. Preston let out a disbelieving laugh. Are you offering me a demotion? I'm offering you a chance to learn, Silas corrected. You know the hotel business, that's clear. But you have no idea how to treat people, so if you stay, you'll start from the bottom. The very bottom. Learning how each area of the hotel works, working alongside people you used to boss around. That's humiliating. No, said Silas calmly. Humiliation is what you did to me when I got here. This here is an education, but the choice is yours. You can accept it and learn, or you can leave. Preston looked at him with pure hatred, but there was something else there too. There was fear. Because deep down, he knew finding another manager job without good references would be tough, and Silas, now as the hotel's owner, could make his professional life very difficult. How long do I have to decide? Until next week, when we sign the contract. Preston nodded stiffly and walked away, his back rigid with barely contained rage. Do you think he'll accept? Asked Sloane when he was out of sight. I don't know, admitted Silas, but I gave him the chance. What he does with it is his problem. The days leading up to the contract signing passed quickly. Silas and his daughters used that time to plan. They created a detailed renovation schedule, a list of priorities, and started making contacts with suppliers. Silas, especially, made a point of personally seeking out each of the former suppliers who had been let go. Mr. Otis almost couldn't believe it when he saw the old man walk into his bakery. Mr. Silas, what brings you here? I came to make you an offer. If you haven't sold this place yet, how about coming back to supply bread for the Majestic Regency? Mr. Otis's eyes filled with tears. Are you serious? As serious as death? No, wait. That wasn't a good comparison. Silas laughed at himself. Serious as warm bread. Yeah, serious as warm bread in the morning. Mr. Otis laughed too, a laugh wet with emotion. But how? You're not the owner yet. I will be in 3 days. And when I am, I want the best bread in New York City served at breakfast. Your bread. I don't know what to say. Say you accept, for goodness sake. I accept, of course I accept. The same scene played out with Mrs. Betty from the flower shop, with Mr. Roy from maintenance, with every small business that had been pushed aside by Preston's efficiency policy. And with each conversation, Silas wasn't just renewing contracts. He was renewing hopes. When the day of the signing finally arrived, a small crowd gathered at the notary public office. There were Silas and his daughters, Arthur and his lawyers, Glenn the realtor, and surprisingly Preston. The deposed manager looked different. He still wore a suit, but he seemed smaller somehow, less arrogant. He waited until all the papers were signed, and Silas was officially the new owner before approaching. Mr. Silas, he said, his voice tense, I came to give you my answer. Everyone fell silent, watching. Preston swallowed hard, as if the words were glass being forced down his throat. I accept your offer. Start from the bottom. Silas studied the younger man's face, searching for sincerity. It won't be easy. You're going to have to do things you consider beneath you. You're going to have to take orders from people who used to take orders from you. You're going to have to swallow your pride every single day. I know. And why accept? Preston took a moment to answer. Because I need to. The job, yes, but also to learn. You were right. I know about hotel management, but I don't know about people, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life being the kind of man who humiliates others to feel big. There was truth in those words, but Silas also recognized a good dose of desperation. Preston wasn't having a miraculous transformation. He was making a pragmatic choice. But sometimes, Silas thought, people change not because they've seen the light, but because they've seen the consequences of their actions. And that counted too. All right, said Silas, extending his hand. Monday, 6 in the morning, you report to Mrs. Gladys. She's going to teach you how to clean rooms properly. They shook hands. Preston still looked like he wanted to die of embarrassment, but he nodded. Arthur watched everything with a mix of relief and melancholy. When he finally left, carrying the check for $4 million, he stopped at the door and looked back. "Mr. Silas," he called out, "take good care of him. Of the hotel, I mean. It was my father's life. I'll take care of it as if it were my own," Silas promised, "because now it is." The following Monday, at exactly 6 in the morning, Preston Thorne reported to the basement of the Majestic Regency, dressed not in a designer suit, but in a simple uniform of a cleaning staff member. Mrs. Gladys was waiting for him with a cart full of cleaning products and an expression that revealed nothing. "Good morning," Preston said, trying to sound humble. "Good morning," Gladys replied. "Ready to work?" "Ready." "Then let's go. First, you'll learn how to make a hospital corner properly. Then we'll teach you how to clean a bathroom until it shines. And after that, if there's time left, you'll start learning about cleaning products and which ones to use on each surface." Preston swallowed hard, but took the cart and followed Gladys down the hallway. Meanwhile, upstairs, Silas gathered all the hotel employees in the event hall. There were nearly 100 people, from cooks to receptionists, from security guards to maintenance technicians. Many looked on with curiosity and hope, others with skepticism. Everyone had been fooled before by empty promises. "Good morning, everyone," Silas began without a microphone, just his steady voice echoing through the hall. "My name is Silas Sterling, and as of yesterday, I am the new owner of this hotel. I know many of you are worried about what that means, so I'll be direct." He paused, looking at the attentive faces. "First, no one is getting fired. Everyone who wants to stay can stay. Second, all overdue wages will be paid by the end of this week. Third, we're going to make changes, lots of changes, but none of those changes will be made without listening to you first." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "I know I'm standing here dressed simply, looking like a countryman, because that's what I am. I spent my life working on the farm, planting, taking care of the land, the animals, the family. I don't know much about a luxury hotel, but I know a lot about hard work and about treating people with respect, and that's what I hope we'll do together." A hand went up in the middle of the crowd. It was a young man, maybe in his 20s, wearing a waiter's uniform. "Go ahead," Silas said. "Sir, you said you're going to listen to us. But is that serious, or is it just to make us feel better?" The question was fair, and Silas respected it. "It's serious. In fact, I'd like to propose something. Let's create an employee council, 5 people elected by you all, who will meet with me and my daughters every week to discuss problems, suggestions, what's working and what's not. Are you up for it?" The silence that followed was pure shock. Never, in the hotel's history, had employees had real input in decisions. "And if we propose something you don't like?" asked one of the housekeepers. "Then we discuss it. As adults, we won't always agree, that's normal. But at least you'll be heard. And if I disagree with something, I'll explain why. No secrets, no lies." Mrs. Gladys, standing in a corner, discreetly wiped her eyes. That was exactly the kind of thing old Mr. Ferreira would have done. "And Preston?" someone yelled from the back. "What's going to happen to him?" "Preston agreed to start over," Silas answered. "He's right now learning how to clean rooms with Mrs. Gladys. He'll go through every department in the hotel, learning each job. And if, at the end of this process, he's truly changed, maybe he can get responsibilities again. But he'll never have the power to mistreat anyone again." The room erupted into lively conversations. Some people looked satisfied, others doubtful, but everyone was talking, discussing, for the first time feeling like they were part of something. Meredith climbed onto the stage to join her father. "I'm going to be the new general manager," she announced. "I have experience in hotel management and I know the market well. My sister Sloane will handle the administrative and financial side, and our younger sister Prudence, as soon as she gets back from Napa Valley, is going to overhaul the entire hotel food system." "We're going to make renovations," continued Sloane, taking the microphone, "but without closing the hotel. We'll work floor by floor, one at a time. Yes, it'll take longer. Yes, it'll be more complicated. But we can't afford to lose 3 months of operations by shutting down completely. And the local suppliers are coming back, added Silas. Mr. Otis and his breads, Mrs. Betty and her flowers, Mr. Roy and his maintenance team. We're going to support local businesses, people who really care about quality, not just price. The meeting went on for over 2 hours. Employees asked questions, some tough, some practical. Silas, Meredith and Sloane answered them all honestly. When it was clear they didn't know an answer, they admitted it. When they needed time to think, they said so. It was Piper, the front desk clerk who had witnessed everything from day one, who asked the final question. Mr. Silas, why did you do this? I mean, you have money. You could have bought a hotel that was already running well, without all these problems. Why did you choose this one? Silas smiled, that tired but genuine smile. You know, miss, when I was younger, I went through a very hard time. My little farm was about to be taken by the bank. My daughters were small. My wife had just... He paused, his voice catching a little... had just left us. I was alone, without money, without hope. The room fell into absolute silence. That's when a neighbor, an old man named Amos, helped me. He didn't have much, but he lent me money without interest, taught me better planting techniques, watched my daughters when I needed to work. He didn't have to do any of that. I was just another broken farmer among so many. But he did it because he said that's how things should work. People helping people. He cleared his throat before continuing. Old Amos passed away 10 years ago, but before he left, he made me promise one thing, that when I was able, I would help others the way he helped me. Not out of obligation, but because it's the right thing to do. So when I saw this hotel, I saw a bunch of good people being mistreated, hard-working folks needing a chance. I remembered my promise. That's why I'm here. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the most cynical, those who had seen so many false promises before, felt there was something different here. There was truth. The meeting ended with applause, something that caught Silas off guard. He wasn't a man used to the spotlight or recognition, but he accepted it with grace, nodding shyly. In the days that followed, the hotel began to change, not dramatically or suddenly, but gradually, consistently. The overdue wages were paid, exactly as promised. Local suppliers returned with quality products. Small repairs that had been ignored for months were finally done. And Preston, surprisingly, showed up every day at 6 in the morning. Mrs. Gladys didn't go easy on him. He learned to clean bathrooms until they sparkled, to make beds with perfect corners, to polish mirrors without leaving streaks. His hands, once soft from only signing papers, began to callous. "How's he doing?" Silas asked Gladys one morning, finding her in the hallway. "He's getting by," she replied, non-committal. "He complains less than I expected. He's still nursing a wounded ego, but he's trying. That's something, at least." "Mr. Silas," Gladys hesitated, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you give him a chance, after everything he did, not just to you, but to all of us?" Silas thought about the question. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, Mrs. Gladys, even if it's just to prove they won't change. But at least then we know we tried." 2 weeks after the acquisition, Silas was in his new office, much smaller and simpler than Arthur's, which he insisted on, when Piper knocked on the door. "Mr. Silas, there's someone here asking to speak with you." "Who is it?" "A woman. She says her name is Esther." Silas stood up immediately. "Please, show her in." Esther was a woman in her 40s, thin, with eyes that bore the marks of many sleepless nights. She entered timidly, as if expecting to be thrown out at any moment. "Mr. Silas," her voice was uncertain. "Mrs. Esther, how wonderful to meet you. Please, have a seat." She sat on the edge of the chair, her hands gripping her purse on her lap. The girls told me you were the new owner, that you were changing things." "I'm trying. And they said you were looking for me. I didn't quite understand why." Silas opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope. "Mrs. Esther, you were accused of theft and fired for cause. Is that true?" She went pale, her eyes filling with tears. "I swear I didn't steal anything. I would never... So I've worked honestly my whole life. I've never taken anything that wasn't mine." "I know. Esther blinked, confused. You know, I talked to everyone who worked with you. No one believes you stole. Everyone knows it was a setup because you went to the previous owner about the unpaid wages. But then I'm here to offer you your job back, with a proper apology for everything you went through and, he slid the envelope across the desk, back pay for the months you were out of work. Esther opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a check and a formal apology letter, admitting that she had been unjustly accused. This is real. Very real. If you want to come back, your position is waiting. If you'd rather not return after everything that happened, I completely understand. But either way, you deserve this money and this apology. Esther started to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. I spent months trying to find another job. But everyone asked for references from my last place, and when they called here, Preston probably told them you were fired for theft, Silas finished, feeling the anger rise. No one would hire me after that. I had to sell my furniture to pay the rent. My daughter had to drop out of college because we couldn't afford it. I thought my life was over. Silas stood up and walked around the desk, kneeling beside Esther's chair to meet her eyes. Mrs. Esther, listen to me carefully. Your life isn't over. You were the victim of a terrible injustice, but that doesn't define who you are. What defines you is how you got up every day, kept trying, kept fighting. That's what shows character. I want to come back, she said between sobs. I loved working here before everything went wrong. Then welcome back. And Mrs. Esther, I'm going to ask you a favor. Anything. When your daughter can go back to college, let me know. We'll figure out how to help. Esther hugged Silas, crying on his shoulder, and the old man, who had seen so much in his life, felt his own eyes well up. That was the first of many stories of redemption and rebuilding. The majestic Regency began to change, not just physically, but in its soul. Employees who had spent years working in fear and resentment began to smile for real. The service improved because people genuinely cared again. Regular customers noticed the difference. Online reviews, which had been steadily dropping, started to climb. Words like cozy, genuine, and like home began appearing in the reviews. But not everything was easy. The renovations brought unexpected challenges. When they started working on the 4th floor, they discovered the piping was worse than they thought, requiring a complete replacement. Costs went up. We're going to need more money, said Sloane at a family meeting. At least another $500,000. We have it, Silas replied simply. Dad, you can't just throw all your money into this. You need to save something for emergencies, for the future. Honey, I'm 70 years old. What future? My future is seeing you all happy, seeing this hotel running, knowing I made a difference. That's priceless. But what if something goes wrong? What if the hotel doesn't recover like we hope? Silas looked at his daughter with those eyes that had seen so many storms. Sloane, when your mother was sick, I spent everything I had trying to save her. Doctors, medicine, treatments, and she still passed away. For a long time I felt guilty for having spent so much in vain. But you know what I realized? It wasn't in vain. Because I did everything I could, I tried every possibility. I don't have to live with, what if I had tried one more thing? It's the same situation here. I'd rather give everything I have and fail than hold back and wonder what could have been. Meredith, who had been listening in silence, joined the conversation. Dad's right, Sloane. Besides, the numbers are improving. Slowly, but they are. If we stay the course, we'll be profitable in a year. If everything goes well, Sloane mused. When does anything in life go perfectly well? Asked Silas, with a tired smile. We do the best we can and hope the universe cooperates a little. And the universe indeed seemed to be cooperating. Or maybe it was just the result of hard work and right decisions. The employee council was formed and met every Friday. The first meetings were tense, with employees still unsure about speaking openly. But over time, trust grew. It was the council that suggested extending breakfast hours on Sundays, noting that many weekend guests arrived late on Friday and wanted to enjoy Sunday morning. The suggestion was implemented, and the results were immediate. Guest satisfaction increased. It was the council that alerted about a moisture problem in the basement, that maintenance had reported but was being ignored. Silas ordered it fixed immediately, avoiding what could have become a much bigger and more expensive issue. "You are the eyes and ears of this place," he said at a meeting. "No one knows this hotel better than those who work here every day. Never be afraid to speak up." Preston, after a month cleaning rooms, moved to the kitchen. Frank, the head chef, received him with skepticism. "Do you know how to cook anything?" "I know how to make scrambled eggs." Frank rolled his eyes. "We'll start from absolute zero then. Grab that knife and start chopping these vegetables." Preston discovered that kitchen work was much more physical and demanding than he had imagined. The heat, the frenetic pace, the required precision. Everything was new and humbling for someone who had spent years giving orders from behind a desk. But it was also, strangely, liberating. There was no room for political games there. Either you did the job well or you didn't. It was simple, straightforward. It was, "You're improving," said Frank after 3 weeks. "You're still slow and clumsy, but you're trying." "Thank you." Preston wasn't sure if that was a compliment. It wasn't meant to be a compliment. It was supposed to be just facts. "But since we're talking, let me ask you something. Why did you accept this? Why didn't you just walk away?" Preston stopped chopping onions and thought about the question. "At first it was out of necessity. I didn't have another job, I needed the money. But now I don't know. I think because for the first time in my life I'm learning what it really means to work." "You had a job before, several." "I had positions," Preston corrected. "I had titles and salaries, but I didn't know how to really work. Not like you all, I just pushed papers, made decisions that affected people's lives without ever stopping to think about who they were. It was all abstract. And now? Now I know that towel I folded is going to be used by a real person. That room I cleaned will welcome someone who's far from home. That food I helped prepare might be the only good meal someone has today. It's different." Frank studied the younger man with experienced eyes. "You're starting to get it. It took a while, but you're getting it. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out." Now, continuing, 3 months after the acquisition, Prudence, the youngest daughter, finally returned from Napa Valley. She was 28 years old, curly hair tied up in a practical ponytail, and had a contagious enthusiasm for food. "Dad!" She hugged Silas tightly at the airport. "I missed you so much." "Missed you too, sweetheart. So now, ready to revolutionize the hotel kitchen?" "More than ready." Prudence brought new ideas but respected the knowledge of Frank and his team. Together, they revamped the menu, keeping traditional dishes while elevating the presentation and quality. She also insisted on using local products whenever possible, creating partnerships with small producers from the region. "It's not enough for it to be pretty," she explained to the team. "It has to have a story. When we serve cheese from Mr. Paul, who's been raising goats for 40 years, we're not just serving cheese. We're serving decades of knowledge, of love for the craft. That's what makes the difference." The hotel restaurant, which had been merely functional before, started to attract attention. Food critics came, and the reviews were surprisingly positive. It wasn't just about the food, they wrote, but about the complete experience. About feeling that there was care, purpose, soul in every dish. It was during this period that something unexpected happened. A reporter from a travel magazine came to do a story on the hotel's transformation. She stayed 3 days as a guest, observing, talking to employees and customers. The article that came out was a full page with photos and interviews. But what really caught attention was the headline, "From Countryman to Savior, How a Simple Man Rescued the Soul of a Luxury Hotel." The magazine told the whole story: Silas's initial humiliation, the revelation, the purchase, the changes, the impact on the employees. There were interviews with Mrs. Gladys, with Piper, with Esther. Even Frank contributed a quote about how the new management valued people. And there was an interview with Preston. "I was a terrible human being," he admitted in the article. "I thought being efficient meant being cold, that leading meant intimidating. Mr. Silas showed me I was wrong about everything. This wasn't a second chance they gave me. It was a first chance to learn how to be human." The article went viral. Suddenly, the majestic Regency was everywhere. TV shows wanted to interview Silas. Business magazines wanted to know about his revolutionary management model. Silas hated all of it. "I'm not revolutionary," he grumbled. "I'm just treating people the way people should be treated. That shouldn't be news." "But it is news because it's rare, Dad," Meredith explained. "And it better be. The more people see there's a better way to do things, the more they'll try to implement it. I just wanted to work in peace." But peace wasn't an option now. With the attention came challenges too. Other hotels in the area started competing more aggressively, offering discounts to lure guests who were heading to the Regency. Former rivals criticized publicly, saying it was impossible to maintain that model long-term, that eventually the hotel would have to cut costs like everyone else. There were also sabotage attempts. Small things at first: fake negative reviews online, rumors spread about health issues at the restaurant. Nothing that could be proven, but annoying all the same. "They're scared," said Sloan during a crisis meeting. "The Regency is proving you can be profitable by treating employees well, and that threatens their model." "So what do we do?" asked Prudence. "We keep doing the right thing," replied Silas firmly. "We're not lowering our standards because others want us to fail." But the pressure was taking its toll. Silas, who had never been a man to sleep poorly, started having restless nights, worries about money, about maintaining quality, about not letting down the people who trusted him. It was during one of those nights, at 3 in the morning, that he went down to the empty hotel kitchen to make some tea. He found someone already there. Preston. The former manager was sitting at the stainless steel table, still wearing his work uniform, a cold cup of coffee in front of him. "Mr. Sterling." He stood up quickly. "Sorry, I didn't know anyone else would be awake." "Sit down, son. Can't sleep either." "Can't sleep." Preston sat back down, looking embarrassed. "I've been thinking a lot. About everything, about who I was, about the things I did." Silas made his tea in silence, giving Preston time to organize his thoughts. "I destroyed lives," Preston continued, his voice breaking. "Esther almost lost everything because of me. Those housekeepers went months without pay while I got bonuses. Mr. Otis almost lost his lifelong bakery. And I didn't care. I thought I was doing my job, being efficient, but I was just being cruel. Have you apologized to those people?" "How can I? Apologies seem so insignificant compared to what I did." Silas sat down across from Preston, blowing on his hot tea. "Apologies don't fix the past, that's true, but they show you recognize the mistake. And more important than apologies are actions. Have you changed?" "I'm trying." "I didn't ask if you're trying. I asked if you've changed." Preston thought long and hard before answering. "Yes, I've changed. I'm no longer that man who humiliated people to feel powerful, but I don't quite know who I am now either. It's like I'm stuck between who I was and who I want to be, without really knowing where the middle ground is." "That's normal," said Silas. "Real change doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. Sometimes you'll take 2 steps forward and 1 back. The important thing is to keep trying." "Have you ever had to change? Like, drastically?" Silas let out a low laugh. "Son, I've changed so much in life that sometimes I don't even recognize who I used to be. When my wife got sick, I had to learn to be both a father and mother. When she passed, I had to learn to live with the pain without letting it consume me. When they found mineral water on my land, I had to learn to deal with money, with business, with people trying to take advantage. Each phase required me to transform into someone new." "And how did you know you were changing the right way?" "I never knew for sure. But I had a simple test. I'd look in the mirror and ask if I could respect the man I saw there. If the answer was yes, I was on the right track. If it was no, I needed to adjust." Preston fell silent, absorbing the words. "Can I ask you a personal question, Mr. Sterling?" "Go ahead. Why did you help me? After everything I did, not just to you but to so many others. Why didn't you just fire me and be done with it?" Sterling took a sip of tea before answering. "Because someone helped me when I didn't deserve it. When I was younger, arrogant in my own way, thinking I knew everything about farming because I'd read some books, I dismissed old Amos's advice. That neighbor I told you about. I planted everything wrong, lost an entire harvest. And when he could have said, "I told you so," you know what he did? He helped me recover. He taught me patiently. And when I asked why, after I'd been so proud, he said something I never forgot. What did he say? He said, "Judging is easy. Anyone can point out someone else's mistake and feel superior. The hard part, what really matters, is giving someone the chance to learn from their mistake and grow. Because deep down, we're all just folks trying to do the best we can in a complicated world." A tear rolled down Preston's cheek. He wiped it quickly, but more came. "I don't deserve this kindness." Nobody deserves kindness, son. We receive it because someone chooses to give it, not because we earn it. Then it's up to you to decide what to do with it. Will you waste it or will you pass it on? Preston nodded, unable to speak through his silent tears. The two men sat in the empty kitchen until the sun began to rise, each lost in their own thoughts but oddly connected in that moment of shared vulnerability. The next morning, Preston called a meeting with the people he had hurt most directly. Esther, Mrs. Gladys, Mr. Otis, and a few others. It was a small, private meeting in one of the smaller conference rooms. He began, his voice trembling, "I want to apologize, truly. Not because I expect you to forgive me, but because you deserve to hear that I know how wrong I was." And then, for the first time in his life, Preston Thorne completely humbled himself. He detailed each of his bad decisions, admitted his selfish motives, acknowledged the impact he'd had on their lives. "Esther," he looked directly at her, "you were accused of theft on my orders. There was no evidence because there was no crime. I made it all up because you had the courage to speak the truth. Your daughter had to drop out of college because of me. There are no excuses that can erase that, but you need to know I carry that weight every day." Esther watched him with an unreadable expression. "Mrs. Gladys, you ladies worked 3 months without pay while I made sure my bonus went through. I knew you were struggling. I just didn't care enough. Mr. Otis, I cancelled your bakery's 30-year contract with a single email. I didn't even have the guts to tell you in person. I nearly destroyed your life's work for a 40% discount." He went on, person by person, wrong by wrong. When he finished, he was visibly drained, as if he'd run a marathon. The silence that followed was heavy. It was Mrs. Gladys who spoke first. "I can't speak for the others," she said slowly, "but I can speak for myself. What you did was terrible. You treated us like we were invisible, disposable. And that hurt more than the late paychecks, you know. It hurt to be invisible." Preston nodded, accepting every word as deserved. "But," Gladys continued, "I also see that you're changing. For real. I saw you clean bathrooms with your own hands, make beds, sweat in the kitchen. You're not just saying you're different, you're showing it. That doesn't erase what I did. No, but it's a start. And everyone deserves a chance to start over, as long as it's genuine." One by one, the others spoke. Some were willing to forgive, while others still held a grudge. All acknowledged that Marcello was, at least, trying. Mr. Otis was the last. "You know what hurt the most?" said the old baker. "It wasn't losing the contract. It was losing the dignity of a proper goodbye. After 30 years, I deserved at least a conversation, a handshake, a thank you. But you discarded me as if those 30 years meant nothing. You're right, completely right. But," Mr. Otis stood up and walked over to Marcello, "I also believe in second chances. My own son disappointed me many times before finding his way. If I can give him chances, I can give you one too." He extended his hand. Marcello shook it, and for the first time in a long while, something like hope blossomed in his chest. The meeting ended without major resolutions, but with an understanding. The past wouldn't be forgotten, but perhaps it could be forgiven if the future were different. Months passed. The hotel kept improving. The renovations progressed floor by floor. Profits, slowly but steadily, grew. What began as a rescue project turned into a case study on human-centered management. Universities started asking to bring students for visits. Silas always agreed, but with one condition. Students had to talk to the staff, not just management, because, as he always said, they're the ones who truly make the hotel run. It was during one of these visits that something unexpected happened. One of the students, a young man around 20, approached Silas at the end of the tour. "Mr. Sterling?" He seemed nervous. "Can I speak with you privately?" "Of course, son. Let's go out to the garden." In the small garden behind the hotel, which Silas had restored, the two sat down on a wooden bench. "What is it?" "My name is Caleb, and I'm the grandson of Mr. Arthur Harrison." Silas looked at him with surprise. "Grandson?" "Yes. My grandfather is the son of the hotel's founder. He doesn't talk much about selling the Regency, but I know it was very hard on him." "I imagine so. I wanted to thank you for what you did. Not just for buying the hotel, but for the way you treated my grandfather. He told me you could have tried to pay less, taken advantage of his desperation, but you didn't. You paid a fair price, took on the debts, and still kept my great-grandfather's legacy alive." "Your great-grandfather built something special," said Silas. "I wasn't about to be the one to destroy it." "My grandfather also told me about the last time he came to visit the hotel a few months ago, how everything was different but also the same, how it had become what it was in my great-grandfather's day." Silas didn't know Arthur had visited. He had never mentioned it. "He came?" "He did. He sat in the lobby for hours just watching. He saw Mrs. Gladys working and almost cried. She's worked here since he was a child. He said it felt like going back in time to when things were good. He could have talked to me. He said he didn't want to interfere, that he wasn't the owner anymore, didn't have the right. But he wanted you to know." Caleb took an envelope from his pocket. "He asked me to give you this." Silas opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter in shaky cursive. "Mr. Sterling, I'm not a man of many fancy words, but I need to say this. Thank you. Thank you for doing what I couldn't. Thank you for saving not just the hotel, but my family's honor. My father built that place with love, and I nearly destroyed it all through incompetence and poor choices. Seeing the Regency return to what it was, seeing happy employees again, knowing my father's legacy is safe in your hands. No amount of money can buy that relief. You could have changed the name, erased our history, started from scratch. But he kept everything that was good and fixed what was broken. That's more than a favor, it's a gift. My grandson, Caleb, is studying hotel management. He wants to follow in his great-grandfather's footsteps, do things right from the start. If one day he comes asking for a job, I ask that you consider it. Not for me, but for him. And if you think he's not ready, tell him. He needs to learn from someone who knows how to do things the right way, and you are that someone. With eternal gratitude, Arthur Harrison." Silas read the letter twice, then looked at Caleb. "You want to work here?" "Very much, but I'm not asking for favors. If you think I don't have what it takes, I'll understand." "When do you graduate?" 6 months from now." "Then 6 months from now, you come back here. I won't promise you a job, but I'll promise you a fair chance. You'll start from the bottom, like everyone, but if you show you have what it takes, you can grow." Caleb smiled, a wide smile that lit up his young face. "That's all I wanted, sir, a fair chance." "And tell your grandfather," Silas added, "that he can visit whenever he wants. He doesn't have to hide in the lobby. This hotel may have my name on the contract, but it will always have the soul of the Harrison family in it." When Caleb left, Silas was alone in the garden, holding the letter. He thought about his own father, a simple man who had worked until his last days, who never had much but always had dignity. He thought about how proud the old man would be if he could see where his son had ended up. But the pride wasn't about money or property. It was about doing the right thing even when it was hard. It was about helping people even when there was nothing to gain. It was about building something bigger than yourself. That night there was a small celebration. It was the 1-year anniversary of the hotel's acquisition. Silas didn't want a big party, but his daughters insisted on at least a dinner with the closest staff. The table was full of food prepared by Prudence and Frank's team. Mrs. Gladys and her fellow housekeepers were there, Piper, who was now front desk manager, Mr. Otis, who had brought special breads for the occasion, Mrs. Betty, with flower arrangements that perfumed the room, Esther, who had been promoted to laundry supervisor, and even Preston. The former manager was different, thinner but in a healthy way. He had a humbler posture but not defeated, and when he smiled, which happened more often now, it was a genuine smile. "A toast," proposed Meredith, raising her glass, "to a year of changes, challenges, and growth. To all of you who make this hotel run, and especially to the man who taught us that success isn't measured in money, but in lives touched." To Mr. Silas, everyone toasted. Silas, uncomfortable with the attention, tried to deflect. "Ah, stop it. I only did what anyone would do." "No," interrupted Mrs. Gladys. "Anyone wouldn't do it. Most people look at the profit, not the people. You were different from day one." "Mrs. Gladys is right," agreed Piper. "I remember the day you got here. I saw Preston humiliate you." She glanced quickly at Preston, who lowered his eyes. "And I thought, just another rich guy being a jerk to poor folks. But then you came back, bought the hotel, and the first thing you did was take care of the people. That's not common. That's special." "I almost lost everything because of my selfish choices," said Preston, speaking publicly for the first time that night. "But Mr. Silas gave me something I didn't deserve, a chance to start over, to learn, to be better, and that changed my life." "Everyone deserves second chances," said Silas simply. "Not everyone gives those chances," retorted Preston. "Most people just punish and move on. You chose to teach. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to honor that choice." The conversation stretched into the night, stories being shared, laughter echoing through the living room. At some point, Mr. Otis started telling tales of old Mr. Arthur Harrison, the hotel's founder, and how he used to do exactly the kind of thing Silas was doing now. He knew every employee's name. Mr. Otis recounted, his eyes shining with memories, even the temporary ones. And he always asked about their families. "When my wife had our first child, he showed up at the hospital with gifts. He didn't send someone to deliver them. He showed up himself. He was a special man," Mrs. Gladys agreed. "And when he passed, I thought that kind of management had died with him. But then Mr. Silas showed up, and it's like old Arthur's spirit had come back." Silas was touched by the comparison, but also humble. "I'm not him. I'm just an old countryman who got lucky in life and decided to use that luck to do something good." "It wasn't luck," said Sloane, his daughter. "It was choice. At every step, you chose the harder path because it was the right one. That's not luck, Dad. That's character." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and hit that like button and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The following months brought new challenges and new victories. Caleb, Arthur's grandson, came back after graduating and was hired as an assistant manager. He worked directly with Meredith, learning not just the technical aspects of hotel management, but also the philosophy that made the Regency different. "It's not just about numbers," Meredith patiently explained. "Numbers are important, sure, but at the end of the day, you're dealing with people. Employees who have families to support, dreams to chase, problems to solve. If you forget that, the numbers might look good for a while, but eventually everything falls apart." Caleb absorbed every lesson like a sponge. He had the advantage of growing up hearing stories about his great-grandfather, so he already came in with the right mindset. But he still had a lot to learn about applying those principles in practice. His first big test came when an important guest, an influential businessman, started treating the maids with disrespect. He'd yell when something wasn't exactly to his liking, make disparaging comments, even deliberately threw towels on the floor to give extra work, as if it were a joke. Caleb saw one of the maids, a young woman named Daisy, leave the man's room with tears in her eyes. "What happened?" he asked, worried. "Nothing, Mr. Caleb, just a difficult guest." "Tell me." Reluctantly, Daisy described the businessman's behavior. Caleb felt anger rise, but forced himself to stay calm. "Thank you for telling me. Leave it with me." He went straight to Meredith, reporting the situation. "What do you think we should do?" she asked, testing him. "Well, he's an important guest. He spends a lot of money here, has influence." Caleb paused, realizing where he was heading. "No. It doesn't matter how important he is. Nobody treats our employees like that. And so, I'm going to talk to him, politely but firmly." If he doesn't change his behavior, we'll ask him to stay somewhere else. Meredith smiled. Exactly. And don't go alone. I'm going with you. Together they went to see the businessman. The conversation was tense. The man alternated between trying to use his status to intimidate them and brushing off the problem. They're just maids, and he said with disdain. They're paid to do the job. They're paid to clean rooms, Meredith corrected, her voice like steel. Not to be disrespected. And in this hotel we treat all human beings with dignity. If you can't do the same, we're going to have to ask you to find accommodations elsewhere. Are you kicking me out? The businessman turned red. Do you know who I am? I do, and I don't care, Meredith replied. Our employees are worth more than your business, no matter how big it is. The man made a scene, threatened to sue, said he'd tell everyone he knew about the terrible treatment. But in the end, he packed his bags and left. Later, when word spread among the staff, there was spontaneous applause. Daisy hugged Caleb and Meredith with tears of gratitude. No one ever stood up for us like that before, she sobbed. You'll have to get used to it, Caleb said with a smile, because that's how we do things here. Silas, when he heard about the incident, just nodded in approval. His teachings were being absorbed and applied. The legacy would continue. But not everything was about grand gestures. Often, it was the little things that made a difference, like when Silas found out that one of the night guards, Grant, was struggling to pay for his daughter's private school. Instead of just giving him money, Silas offered a scholarship program for employees' children, sponsored by the hotel. Or when he noticed the kitchen got extremely hot in the summer, uncomfortable for the staff working long hours there, he invested in a proper air conditioning system, improving not only comfort, but the team's productivity and morale. Or when he implemented 1 day a month where each employee could bring a suggestion directly to him without going through managers or supervisors. Some suggestions were impractical, others brilliant, but all were heard and considered. These small changes, accumulated over time, completely transformed the hotel's culture. Employees didn't just work there. They cared, and when people care, they do the job differently. Guests noticed. Online reviews often mentioned not just the facilities or the food, but the warmth of the place. How they genuinely felt welcome, not just tolerated while they paid. It was this edge that saved the hotel when an unexpected crisis hit. A severe flu pandemic swept the country. It wasn't as terrible as other diseases the world had seen, but it was enough to make people avoid non-essential travel. Hotels across the nation saw their occupancy rates plummet. The majestic Regency was no exception. Within weeks, occupancy dropped from 80% to under 20%. Future reservations were cancelled en masse. Sloan presented the numbers at an emergency meeting with a grim expression. If this continues, we'll have to make cuts, she said. Layoffs, salary reductions, something. No, Silas said immediately. Dad, we don't have a choice. We can't keep all the employees if there aren't enough guests. There must be another way. Like what? Sloan was clearly frustrated. We've already cut non-essential costs. We've postponed planned renovations. There's no more fat to trim without touching salaries. Meredith stepped in. What if we cut management salaries, ours, I mean? Dad, you and I earn considerably more than the other employees. If we temporarily cut our salaries by 50%, that gives us some breathing room in the budget. Me too, Prudence offered. My salary can be cut. And mine, Sloan said after a moment. But even then, I'm not sure it'll be enough. Silas thought for a long moment. What if we use this time of low occupancy to invest in our employees? How so? Well, we have a lot of idle people now, right? Instead of laying them off, how about we use this time for training? Maid staff can learn more advanced techniques. Kitchen staff can experiment with new dishes. Front desk clerks can take language courses. When the crisis is over, we'll have an even more skilled team. But that costs money, Sloan argued. Less than laying people off and then having to hire and train new staff when things pick up, Meredith countered. And it keeps the team's loyalty. They'll remember that we didn't abandon them when it got tough. Besides, Silas added, I can use some of my personal savings to cover the temporary shortfall. Dad, no. You've already invested too much. And I'll invest more if I have to. These people trusted me. I'm not going to abandon them now. The decision was made, executives' salaries were cut, training programs were implemented, and Silas covered the rest out of his own pocket. When the employees found out what was happening, the reaction was disbelief followed by deep gratitude. "You're using your own money to keep us employed?" asked Mrs. Gladys, tears in her eyes. "It's not my money," Silas corrected. "It's our money. This hotel belongs to all of us. I just signed the papers." But the crisis brought another unexpected challenge. With few guests, some suppliers began demanding upfront payments or even cancelling contracts, afraid they wouldn't get paid. That's when the loyalty Silas had built proved more valuable than any contract. Mr. Otis, when approached by a competitor offering a guaranteed contract, refused. "You came to me when I was about to lose my bakery," he said to Silas. "I'm not going to abandon you now that you're struggling. I'll keep supplying the bread, and I trust we'll get paid when things improve." Mrs. Betty did the same. Mr. Roy, too. One by one, the local suppliers Silas had helped and treated with respect chose to stay. "You're more than customers," Mrs. Betty explained. "You're family, and family doesn't abandon family in hard times." This support made the difference between surviving and sinking. The hotel managed to maintain minimal operations until, finally, the epidemic began to recede. Gradually, people started traveling again. Bookings began to increase. And when the recovery came, it came strong. Because while other hotels had laid off experienced staff and cut quality, the Majestic Regency had invested and improved. Guests noticed the difference immediately. Within 6 months, the hotel not only recovered its previous occupancy rate, but surpassed it. Online reviews were better than ever, and for the first time since Silas took over, the hotel had an exceptional quarter of profit. "We did it," Sloane announced at a family meeting, tears of joy streaming. "We not only survived, but we thrived, because we did the right thing," Silas said simply. "It always works out in the end when you do the right thing." "Not always, Dad," Meredith gently corrected. "Sometimes people do everything right and still fail. We were lucky too." "Maybe," Silas agreed, "but I'd rather be lucky doing the right thing than successful doing the wrong one." It was during this recovery period that Preston asked for a private meeting with Silas. 2 years had passed since he had started as a cleaning assistant. In that time, he had rotated through practically every department in the hotel: housekeeping, kitchen, laundry, maintenance, front desk. Each position for at least 3 months, learning not just the tasks, but the people. "Mr. Sterling," he began, sitting in the modest office, "I want to thank you for the 2 years you gave me. I've learned more in this time than in my entire previous career." "You're welcome, son, but you worked hard. The credit is yours. I wanted you to know that I'm applying for jobs at other hotels." As manager, Silas raised his eyebrows, surprised and a little hurt, though he tried not to show it. "You want to leave?" "No, that's not it," Preston hurried to explain. "Well, it is, but not for the reasons you think. It's just that I feel like I've learned everything I could here, and there are other hotels out there with managers just as bad as I was, treating employees just as poorly as I did. I thought maybe I could make a difference somewhere else, take what I learned here where it's needed." Silas leaned back in his chair, studying the younger man. "So you want to spread what you learned?" "Yes. You changed my life. You changed how I see people, how I understand leadership, what it really means to succeed. It would be selfish to keep that just for myself." "And you think you're ready? That you've really changed enough?" Preston thought carefully before answering. "I don't know if anyone is ever completely ready, but I know I'm not the man I was. And I know that even if I make mistakes, I'll make them trying to do the right thing, not the easy or profitable thing. That has to count for something." Silas was silent for a long moment, then smiled. "You know what you remind me of? You remind me of a sapling. I planted you here, took care of you, watered you, but there comes a time when the sapling needs to be transplanted to truly grow. Staying in the same small pot will only stunt its growth. So you're not mad?" "Mad? I'm proud. Very proud. You could have learned enough to have a comfortable job here and stayed. But you're choosing the harder path because that's where you can make the biggest difference. That's exactly what I hoped you'd learn. Thank you, Mr. Silas, for everything. But let me give you some advice before you go. What? When you get to that new hotel, you're going to want to change everything at once. You'll see all the problems and want to fix them immediately. Don't do that. No? No. Change that's too fast scares people, creates resistance. You need to go slow, build trust first, show that you truly care. Only then will people accept the changes. I learned that the hard way. I'll remember that. And one more thing, never ever forget where you came from, the mistakes you made, the person you were, because that's what's going to keep you humble. That's what will remind you to always treat people with respect. I'll never forget, I promise. 2 weeks later, Preston accepted an assistant manager position at a mid-sized hotel in rural Pennsylvania. It wasn't as high a position as he'd once had, but it was a fresh start. A chance to apply everything he had learned. On his last day at the Majestic, the staff threw a small farewell for him. It wasn't big or elaborate, just a gathering in the break room with a cake that Frank had made. "We won't say we'll miss you," Mrs. Gladys joked, "because you were terrible at first. But the man leaving today, him we'll miss." Preston laughed, a laugh wet with emotion. "I know I was awful, and I know many of you are still carrying hurt. I am too. But thank you for giving me the chance to be better." "Go out there and make a difference," said Piper, "and if you ever treat anyone badly out there, we'll hear about it and come get you personally." "I believe you would," Preston smiled. When he finally left, Silas walked him to his car. "Preston," he called before the young man got in. "One last thing." "Yes?" "Don't be me. Be you. Learn from what I did, but find your own way of doing things, because every person is different. Every situation is unique. The important thing isn't to copy the method, it's to understand the principle. People matter. If you remember that, you'll do well." "I'll remember. And Mr. Silas, thank you for not giving up on me when everyone else had. Thank you for not giving up on yourself." They shook hands one last time, and then Marcello left, carrying with him the lessons that would change not only his career, but his life. The years passed. The Majestic Regency continued to thrive under the management of Silas and his daughters. Caleb, who had started as an assistant manager, gradually climbed the ranks, proving worthy of his great-grandfather's legacy. Meredith was preparing him to eventually take over as general manager whenever she wanted to retire. But not everything was about work. Silas began to take more time for himself. At 72, he acknowledged he was no longer the tireless young worker. Some mornings his knee ached, some nights exhaustion set in earlier. It was during one of these moments of reflection that he received an unexpected letter. It was from Marcello. "Dear Mr. Silas, I hope this letter finds you well. It has been a year since I left the Regency, and I wanted to share some news. The hotel where I now work was in as bad a shape as the Regency when you arrived. Demotivated staff, high turnover, falling profits. But I remembered your words. I took it slow. I spent the first 3 months just observing and talking to people, understanding the real problems, not just the obvious ones. And then I started making changes. Small ones at first. Making sure salaries were paid on time, fixing maintenance issues that had been ignored, creating a feedback system where employees could speak without fear. It wasn't easy. The owner was skeptical. Some employees were resistant. They had seen too many false promises before. But I persisted, and slowly things began to change. This month, for the first time in 5 years, the hotel turned a significant profit. More importantly, no employee has quit this year. 0 turnover. And guest ratings have gone from 3.2 to 4.6 stars. The owner is so impressed that he offered me a partnership. I'm going to become co-owner of the hotel. None of this would have been possible without what I learned from you. Not just management techniques, but the philosophy behind them. That people are not resources to be exploited, but partners to be valued. That success isn't just about money, but about impact. I am enclosing a check with this letter. It's not much, but it's my way of starting to give back. I'd like you to use it for the scholarship program you created for employees' children. I know it's important to you, and I want to contribute. Thank you once again for everything. With eternal gratitude, Preston Thorne. Inside the envelope was a check for $50,000. Silas read the letter 3 times, his eyes welling up. Meredith, who was with him in the office, noticed. "Dad, you okay?" "Yeah, sweetheart." He handed her the letter to read. "Everything's just fine." When Meredith finished reading, she also had tears in her eyes. "He really changed." "He did, and now he's changing his world. That's how it works. You don't change the whole world at once. You change one person, who changes another, who changes another, like ripples on a pond. You're a good man, Dad." "I try. That's all anyone can do. Try." Later that day, there was a small emergency. A family with 3 young children had arrived at the hotel, but something was wrong. The woman, visibly pregnant and pale, looked like she was about to faint. Her husband held her arm, eyes full of panic. "Please," he begged at the front desk, "we need a room urgently. My wife isn't well." Piper, who now coordinated the front desk, immediately called for help. Within minutes, the woman was lying down in one of the suites, a doctor who happened to be staying at the hotel already examining her. Silas, upon hearing what happened, went upstairs to check if there was anything he could do. She found her husband in the hallway, pacing nervously back and forth, while the 3 young children cried in fright. "Hey there," Silas called gently. "Are the kids hungry?" The man looked at him, seeming to notice his children for the first time. Yes, probably. But I can't leave my wife." "Yes, you can. The doctor's with her, and if anything changes, I'll call for you right away. But these kids need you now." Still hesitant, the man nodded. Silas led them to the restaurant and asked the staff to prepare something simple and comforting. While the children ate, the father finally let himself breathe. "Sorry for the trouble," he said. "It's just, we were traveling when she started having pains. The doctor said it might be early labor. We tried to get home, but she got worse and—" "No need to explain," Silas said, placing a hand on the man's shoulder. "The important thing is she's being taken care of now, and you can stay as long as you need. But either cost what I have some money, but if she has to stay for days, we'll figure that out later. Right now you take care of your family. We'll handle the rest." The doctor eventually diagnosed that it wasn't labor, but a scare caused by dehydration and stress. With rest and proper care, the woman would recover fine, but he recommended she not travel for at least a week. The family couldn't afford a week at the 5-star hotel. When the husband, embarrassed, explained the situation, Silas simply said, "You stay. No charge." "Sir, we can't accept that." "Yes, you can. Your wife needs rest. Your kids need stability. This is a hotel, not a bank. Sometimes you help because it's the right thing, not because it's profitable." The family stayed. During that week, Silas saw the 3 children playing in the hotel's small garden, saw the woman slowly getting her color back, saw the husband finally relax. It was just one family among many that passed through the hotel, but for them, that week meant everything. On the day they left, fully recovered, the man tried once more to pay for something. "At least the meals." "No need, but if you want to do something, when your life gets better, help someone else who's in a tough spot. That way we keep the circle going." The woman, tears in her eyes, hugged Silas. "May God bless you for everything." "He already has," Silas replied, looking at the 3 happy kids, "with the chance to make a difference." But while moments like this warmed Silas's heart, bigger challenges were approaching. The hotel industry in New York City was changing fast. Major international chains were opening hotels in the city, with massive budgets for marketing and aggressive promotions. The majestic Regency started to feel the pressure. The occupancy rate, which had reached 85%, began to drop again. Not dramatically, but enough to worry. "They're offering nightly rates at half our price," Sloan explained in a tense meeting. "How can we compete with that?" "We can't," said Meredith. "At least not on price. Our cost structure won't allow it. We pay fair wages, use quality products, maintain high standards. That costs money." "So what do we do?" asked Prudence. "Just sit back and watch ourselves lose market share?" Silas, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke. "We don't compete on price. We compete on value." Explain that better, Dad. These big hotels, they can offer cheap rooms, but what else do they offer? It's all standardized, automated, cold. The person is just another number. Here at the Majestic, every guest is treated as an individual. The housekeepers know their names, the restaurant staff remembers their preferences, the front desk knows each one's story. That's priceless. But how do we make people understand that before they come? Asked Sloane, always practical. We let our guests tell them, suggested Caleb, who was part of the meeting. The best advertising comes from genuine recommendations. We need to create experiences so good that people can't help but share them. The idea was good, but the execution would be challenging. They started by implementing small personal touches. When a guest mentioned in their reservation that it was their birthday, the room was decorated with flowers and a simple but delicious cake awaited. When someone came for medical treatment, the team offered information about nearby hospitals and made themselves available for any assistance. An elderly woman staying at the hotel for oncology appointments casually mentioned to a housekeeper that she was scared of the treatment. The housekeeper told Mrs. Gladys, who told Silas. On the day of the appointment, when the woman returned, exhausted and emotionally drained, she found a note in the room. "Dear guest, we heard today was a tough day. We asked the kitchen to prepare your favorite soup. You mentioned it was chicken broth. It's waiting whenever you'd like. And remember, you are stronger than you think, braver than you believe. Our whole team is rooting for you." The woman cried when she read it, and 2 weeks later, when she was finally discharged and returned to her hometown, she wrote an online review that went viral. It didn't talk about luxury or amenities. It talked about humanity, about how a hotel full of strangers made her feel loved in one of the hardest moments of her life. The review was shared thousands of times. TV programs reached out. Magazines wanted to do stories. And with that came a different kind of guest. People who weren't just looking for a place to sleep, but a genuine human experience. The occupancy rate not only recovered, but exceeded 90%. And most importantly, these people were willing to pay a fair price because they understood the value. But success brought a new challenge. Offers started coming in. Investors wanted to buy the hotel. Hotel chains wanted to franchise the model, all with a lot of money on the table. The most tempting offer came from a large international hotel group. They were offering $20 million for the hotel, plus a consulting contract for Silas and his daughters to implement the imperial model across their entire network. "Dad," said Sloane with the proposal in hand, this is generational wealth. We could accept and still spread what we've built here." "But would it be the same?" asked Meredith. "Do you think we could keep the essence in hotels of a big corporation?" "Maybe not exactly the same," admitted Sloane, "but we could impact a lot more people." Silas remained quiet for a long time, looking out the office window at the garden where some guests were relaxing. "Can I tell you a story?" he finally asked. "Of course, Dad. When you were little, right after your mother left, I had a similar offer. A big agricultural producer wanted to buy my land, offered good money, said I could work for them as a consultant. Back then I was desperate. I needed money. I was alone with 3 little girls. It seemed like the perfect solution. Why didn't you take it?" "Because I realized something. That land, as small as it was mine. I decided what to plant, how to care for it. I could experiment, make mistakes, get it right. If I sold it, I would have money but lose my autonomy. I'd lose the ability to do things my way. And in the end, I found that was worth more than any amount." "But this is different, Dad," argued Sloane. "You were young, you had to raise 3 daughters. Now you're over 70, we're grown, and you've done your part." "Have I really?" Silas looked at his daughters. "Because I look at you 3 and see there's still a lot for you to learn. And this hotel is the best place for that. If we sell now, you'll lose the chance to keep growing, to pass this on, to build your own legacy." "But 20 million, Dad." "Sloane, tell me something. Are you happy working here?" The question caught her off guard. "I am. Very much." "And you, Meredith?" "Me too, Dad. Sometimes it's stressful, challenging, but yes, I'm happy." "Prudence?" "I wouldn't trade this for anything." "Then explain to me why we need 20 million. We already have everything that matters. Work that fulfills us, people we love around us, the ability to make a difference. Extra money won't increase our happiness. Say it might even decrease it if it comes at the cost of losing all this. Are you saying we should turn down $20 million? Sloane seemed incredulous. I'm saying some things are priceless, and what we've built here, the family we've created with the staff, the impact we have on people's lives, that's one of those things. The decision was made. They turned down the offer. When the news spread, many called them crazy. Business articles questioned the financially irresponsible sentimentality, but for Silas and his daughters, it was clear they'd made the right choice. Mrs. Gladys, when she found out, hugged Silas so tightly he nearly lost his balance. "Thank you," she murmured. "Thank you for not selling us off like cattle. You're not merchandise, Mrs. Gladys. You're family. And you don't sell family." But life, as always, had more challenges in store. A few months after refusing the offer, Silas began feeling unusually tired. At first he chalked it up to age, but when the fatigue came with dizziness and shortness of breath, his daughters forced him to see a doctor. The tests revealed a serious heart condition, not immediately fatal, but one that required care, lifestyle changes, and possibly surgery down the line. "You need to slow down," the doctor said firmly. "No working 12-hour days, no excessive stress. Your heart needs rest." Silas listened in silence, but his daughters saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear of the illness itself, but of what it meant. He had always been an active man, always doing, always taking care. The idea of slowing down terrified him. "Dad," said Meredith, holding his hand on the way home, "you need to take care of yourself now. And the hotel. The hotel is fine. The three of us can handle everything. Caleb is almost ready to take on more responsibilities. You built something that works without needing you there every second." "But I like being there, talking to the staff, getting to know the guests. And you can still do that," Prudence assured him. "You just need to do it less, a few hours a day instead of all day. Let us take on more." It was a tough transition for Silas. In the first few days, he showed up at the hotel early and resisted leaving. But his daughters were firm, and gradually he learned to trust more, to delegate more. And he discovered something surprising. With more free time, he started doing things he'd set aside for years. He got back into reading, something he loved but never had time for. He began visiting old Amos at the cemetery, talking to his old friend's headstone as if he could still hear. And for the first time in decades, he allowed himself to simply sit and watch the world without feeling like he had to be doing something productive. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that a young journalist approached him for an interview. She was writing a book about alternative models of successful businesses and wanted to include the story of the Majestic Regency. "Mr. Silas," she asked, recorder on, "what would you say to other business owners who think treating employees well is financially unfeasible?" Silas thought carefully before answering. "I'd say they're looking at the wrong numbers. They look at the payroll and see an expense. I look and see an investment. Every happy employee works better, stays longer, takes better care of customers. That translates into long-term profit. But a lot of business owners only think short-term." But were there times when this philosophy nearly broke the hotel? There were. During the flu crisis, for example. I could have laid off half the staff and survived with a smaller safety margin, but I chose to take more risk to protect the people. And in the end, it worked out. But even if it hadn't, I still think it would have been the right decision. Why? Because success isn't just about how much money you accumulate. It's about what kind of person you are, what kind of world you leave behind. I'd rather go bankrupt doing the right thing than get rich doing the wrong one. The interview went on for 2 hours. The journalist asked about specific moments, tough decisions, regrets. Silas answered everything with the honesty that defined him. When the book was published, 6 months later, the chapter on the Majestic Regency became the most talked about. Universities started using it as a case study. MBA programs invited Silas to give lectures. He turned down most of them. With his health fragile, he had to carefully pick where to spend his energy. But he agreed to speak at a small business school in a rural town because the coordinator explained that most students came from humble families, the first generation to attend college. They're exactly the kind of people who can change how business works in the United States. the coordinator said. "But they need examples, inspiration." The lecture was moving. Silas didn't use elaborate slides or business jargon. He simply told his story. The countryman who was humiliated, who bought the hotel, who put people above profits, and how, surprisingly, that turned out to be good for profits too. "The world tries to make you believe you have to choose," he said, looking at the young, attentive faces. "Either you're successful in business or you're a good person. But that's a lie. The best people I've met were also excellent at their businesses, and the worst business owners I've seen were also terrible people. The two go hand in hand." At the end of the lecture, a student raised her hand. "Mr. Silas, you talked a lot about treating employees well, but what about when an employee isn't good? When they don't try or do a bad job?" "Great question," Silas nodded. "And the answer is, it depends on why. If the person isn't trying because they don't care, because they're lazy by nature, then maybe it's not the right place for them. But in my experience, that's rare. Most of the time when someone isn't working well, it's because something is wrong. Problems at home, illness, feeling undervalued, lack of proper training. The leader's job is to find out what and help fix it. And if they still don't improve, then you have an honest conversation. You explain what needs to change and give a reasonable time frame for that change to happen. If it still doesn't work, it's time to part ways, but respectfully. Firing someone doesn't have to be cruel. It can be done with dignity, helping the person find something better for them." Another student asked, "But doesn't that make you look weak in the eyes of other employees? Being too kind?" "Kindness isn't weakness," Silas answered firmly. "Kindness takes more strength than cruelty. It's easy to yell, intimidate, fire without mercy. What's hard is having patience, understanding, helping. And employees respect real strength, not the fake version that comes from abusing power." The lecture ended with enthusiastic applause. Several students approached afterward, some with tears in their eyes, saying it had changed how they saw their future careers. Returning to New York City that night, Silas felt a deep peace. His health was fragile, his days of active work were numbered, but what he had built would continue, through his daughters, through people like Preston, through young people like those students who would carry the lessons forward. But life had one more surprise in store. 3 years after that lecture, when Silas had already turned 75 and was spending more time resting than working, an unexpected event occurred. The Majestic Regency was nominated for a national award for excellence in hotel management. It wasn't about luxury or amenities, but specifically about sustainable human resources practices and social impact. "Dad, we need to go to the ceremony," insisted Meredith. "It's in Washington, D.C., but it's going to be important." "I don't know if I can handle the trip." Silas was genuinely tired lately. "We'll fly, stay one night, come back. And the doctor already said you can travel with caution." Reluctantly, Silas agreed. And it was good he went. The ceremony was elegant, full of executives and politicians. Silas felt out of place in his simple suit, but his daughters were radiant at his side. When it was time to announce the winner of the Regency's category, the presenter did something unexpected. "Before announcing the winner," he said, "I'd like to call someone to the stage who represents exactly what this award means." From the side curtains, Preston Thorne emerged, but not the arrogant and cruel Preston of years past. This was a confident yet humble man, genuinely smiling. "Good evening," said Preston into the microphone. "Many of you don't know me, but I know this category's nominee very well. In fact, he changed my life. 6 years ago, I was a hotel manager, and I was the worst version of myself. I treated employees as disposable, valued profit above all else, and I was proud of it. The hall was in absolute silence. Then a simple man walked into the hotel where I worked. I humiliated him publicly because he didn't look rich. I laughed at him, mocked him, treated him as if he were less than nothing. And then I found out he was a multimillionaire and was there to buy the hotel." Murmurs rippled through the audience. "He could have fired me on the spot. He could have destroyed me professionally. But he didn't. He gave me a chance to learn, to grow, to become a better person. And today, 6 years later, I am co-owner of a hotel that uses exactly the principles I learned from him. And I'm here to announce that the winner of this category is the Majestic Regency and its founder, Silas Sterling. The audience burst into applause. Silas, stunned, was gently pushed by his daughters toward the stage. As he went up, Preston hugged him tight. "Thank you," murmured Preston, "for everything." "You did the hard work," replied Silas. "I just gave the opportunity." When Silas took the trophy and turned to the audience, hundreds of unfamiliar faces looked at him with expectation. He had never been good at prepared speeches, so he did what he always did. He spoke from the heart. "This award isn't mine," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion. "It belongs to every housekeeper who cleans rooms with pride, to every cook who prepares food with love, to every front desk agent who treats guests like people, not numbers. It belongs to Mrs. Gladys, who has worked for over 30 years and taught us all what dedication means. It belongs to Piper, who started as a receptionist and now coordinates the entire team. It belongs to Esther, who was unfairly fired but had the courage to return and forgive." He paused, looking at Preston. "And it also belongs to people like Preston here. That they made mistakes, acknowledged them, changed, and are now changing other lives, because that's how you transform the world. One person at a time, one choice at a time, one act of kindness at a time." The applause was deafening, but what Silas would remember most about that night wasn't the applause. It was what happened afterward, at the celebratory dinner. Preston sat with them and told them how he was doing. His hotel was doing so well that they opened a second location. And in this one, they implemented a training program for people experiencing homelessness, giving them skills and employment. "I learned from you that business can be a tool for social change," Preston explained, "so we're doing our part." "Proud of you, son," said Silas, and the use of the word son made Preston's eyes well up. But the biggest surprise of the night came as they were getting ready to leave. An elegant elderly woman approached the table. "Mr. Silas?" Her voice was soft but firm. "Yes?" "My name is Carmen. The lady who was being treated for cancer 3 years ago. Do you remember me?" Silas studied her for a moment, then his face lit up. "The chicken soup lady," Carmen laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Exactly. I wanted you to know that I've been in remission for 2 years, completely cured. And that day when I came back from the appointment and found that note in the room, it gave me the strength to keep fighting. Knowing that people who barely knew me cared enough to do that, it was transformative." "I'm so glad you're well." Silas stood up and hugged her. "Really, truly glad." "But there's more," Carmen continued. "That experience inspired me. When I recovered, I started a foundation to support cancer patients who don't have resources. We help with transportation, food, lodging when they need treatment far from home. And I named the foundation Imperial Hope, after the hotel that showed me strangers can become family." Silas couldn't hold back his tears. Here was more proof that small acts of kindness create waves impossible to predict. Returning to New York City the next day, Silas was exhausted but deeply happy. The award was in his luggage, but what he carried in his heart were the stories. Preston transformed, Carmen healed and transforming other lives, inspired young students. "Was it worth it?" asked Meredith, holding her father's hand on the plane. "Every second," he replied. "Every struggle, every challenge, every moment of doubt. It was all worth it." But Silas's body was paying the price for a lifetime of hard work. In the months following the award, his health began to decline noticeably. The heart condition worsened, and doctors recommended surgery. "It's risky at your age," the cardiologist explained, "but without it, your quality of life will keep declining." Silas decided to have the surgery, not out of fear, but because he still had things he wanted to do, people he wanted to see grow up. The day before the surgery, he gathered not only his 3 daughters, but also the people who had become part of his extended family. Mrs. Gladys was there, and Piper, and Mr. Otis, and so many others. Caleb, too, Arthur's grandson, who was now assistant manager of the hotel. "This isn't a goodbye," Silas began, "but just in case, I wanted to say a few things." "Dad, don't talk like that." Sloane was crying. "Let me speak, sweetheart. I'm old, but I still know how to talk." He looked around the room at those faces that had become so dear to him. "You all gave me so much more than I gave you. You think I saved the hotel, saved jobs, changed lives. But the truth is the opposite. You saved mine. After my wife passed, I was lost. I had money, but no purpose. And then I bought this hotel and found you all. I found family. I found a reason to wake up every day. You gave us dignity," said Mrs. Gladys, her voice choked with emotion. "You made us feel valued when the world said we were invisible." "And you gave me humanity," added Preston, who had made a point of traveling from far away to be there. "You showed me that being strong means being kind, that having power means serving." One by one, they shared what Silas had meant to them, and he listened to it all with silent tears streaming down his wrinkled face. "If I don't make it through this surgery," he finally said, "I want you to know that I'll die happy. Happy because I'm leaving behind a legacy not of money or properties, but of better people. You'll carry on what we started. You'll spread this way of doing things. And one day, maybe, the way we treat each other here won't be the exception, but the rule." The surgery was scheduled for 7 in the morning. When Silas was taken to the operating room, the hallway was packed with hotel employees who had come to wait. Some held hands in prayer, others were just there, wanting to be close. The surgery lasted 7 hours. It was 7 hours of agony for everyone waiting. Meredith, Sloane, and Prudence took turns between crying and trying to stay strong for one another. Mrs. Gladys led prayers. Mr. Otis handed out coffee he had brought from the bakery. When the surgeon finally came out, his face was hard to read. "The surgery was successful," he said, and a collective sigh of relief echoed through the hall. "But he's still at risk. The next 48 hours are critical. If he gets through that without complications, his chances of a full recovery are good." Those were the longest 48 hours any of them had ever lived through. Silas remained in a medically induced coma as his body healed. His daughters took turns by his bedside, holding his hand, talking to him even without knowing if he could hear. "Dad," Meredith whispered on the first night, "you can't go yet. There's still so much ahead. You haven't seen me have kids yet. You haven't seen the hotel reach 10 years under our management. You haven't taught us everything you know." On the second night it was Sloane who murmured, "Remember when I was little and afraid of the dark? You'd sit in my room until I fell asleep every night for months. You said you'd never leave me alone in the dark. Don't leave me alone now, Dad. I still need you." And Prudence, always the most emotional, "You've always been my hero, Dad. Not because you were rich or successful, but because you were good. Because you chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier. Because you never gave up on people. Because you believed everyone deserves a second chance. I can't lose you yet. Please, fight." At the end of the second night, the doctors began to reduce the sedation. Slowly, Silas started to wake. His eyes opened, confused at first, then focusing on his daughters' faces. "I'm still here," he murmured, his voice weak. "Yes, you are, Dad," Meredith cried, "and you'll be here for a long time yet." The recovery was slow but steady. Within 2 weeks, Silas was discharged. He went home, not to the hotel, under strict orders for complete rest for at least 3 months. But the hotel was not forgotten. Employees made regular visits, bringing flowers, food, and mostly stories. They told him about interesting guests, about small problems solved, about successes. They kept Silas connected even from a distance, and slowly, with care, he began to improve. First, he managed to walk to the garden, then to the end of the block. Eventually, the doctor allowed short visits to the hotel. On the day Silas returned to the majestic Regency for the first time after surgery, 4 months later, the staff had prepared a surprise. When he walked into the lobby, all the employees were lined up, applauding. There was a simple banner. "Welcome back, Mr. Silas, we missed you." He cried. She cried because that place, which had started out as just an investment, had become her home, and those people, who were once strangers, were her true family. The following years were calmer. Silas drastically reduced his day-to-day involvement, showing up only a few hours a week, but his impact remained in every policy, every decision, every interaction. Caleb, under Meredith's mentorship, officially took over as general manager. His first act was to institute an annual day called Silas Day, not in honor of the man, but of the values he stood for. On that day, every hotel profit went to local charities. Employees were encouraged to volunteer, and guests were invited to take part in community activities. The event became so popular that other hotels started copying the idea. And so, slowly, the philosophy Silas had planted began to spread beyond the walls of the Regency. Preston, whose hotel chain now included 5 locations in different cities, implemented the same model. Other businessmen who had been inspired by the story started adopting similar practices in their own businesses. It wasn't a sudden revolution. It was a gradual, quiet but profound change. One manager at a time learning to value people, one company at a time discovering that kindness and profit aren't mutually exclusive. When Silas turned 80, his daughters organized a celebration at the hotel. They didn't want anything big, but the news leaked and somehow turned into a massive event. Over 200 people showed up, current and former employees, suppliers, guests who had become friends, even some of the students from that lecture years ago. Esther was there, her foundation now helping hundreds of patients a year. Preston came with his wife and 2 young children, Arthur's grandson, Caleb, now married and with a baby on the way. Esther, who had been promoted to operations manager. Piper, who was about to open her own hotel management consulting firm, and Silas, sitting in a comfortable chair because standing up for too long still tired him, watched it all with teary eyes and a full heart. "Dad," Meredith knelt beside him. "Happy birthday. Any wishes?" Silas looked around the room. He saw smiling faces, saw children running, saw people of different ages and backgrounds all gathered, all connected in some way by him or the values he stood for. "I don't need to wish for anything," he said. "Everything I could ever want is already here." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. But life, as always, kept bringing surprises. A few months after his 80th birthday, Silas received a letter that would change everything once again. It was from the federal government. The National Tourism Board wanted to use the majestic Regency as a model for a national training program in humane hotel management. They offered full funding to turn part of the hotel into a training center where professionals from across the country could come and learn. "Dad, this is huge," said Sloane, the letter trembling in her hands. "We're talking about potentially impacting thousands of hotels all across the United States." "But it'll change the hotel," Silas mused. "It'll bring more people, more hustle and bustle. It'll become more commercial." "Not necessarily," argued Meredith. "We can do it in a way that complements what we already do, not replace it. A few days a month dedicated to training, the rest normal operations. And think of the impact, Dad." Prudence was visibly excited. "Every person we train will go back to their hotel and implement these practices. It's exponential multiplication." Silas thought about it a lot. Part of him wanted to keep things as they were, simple and manageable. But another part recognized the unique opportunity. "Let's do it," he finally decided, but with conditions. First, the head trainers have to be people who lived through this transformation. Preston, for example, or Imperial employees who know the philosophy from the inside. It can't be folks who only studied theory in books. "I agree," said Meredith. "What else?" "Second, the training can't just be about techniques. It has to include the philosophy, the why behind the how. It has to transform hearts, not just teach processes. Consider it done." "And third," Silas looked seriously at his 3 daughters, "you promise you won't let this change the core of who we are. The Imperial has always been about people, about family. If it turns into just another business, I'd rather say no." "We promise, Dad," the 3 said in unison. The program was launched 6 months later. The first class had 20 hotel managers from different states across the United States. They spent 2 weeks at the Imperial, not as students in a classroom, but living the experience. They worked alongside the housekeepers, learning to clean rooms. They helped in the kitchen during peak hours. They took shifts at the front desk. And every night they gathered for discussions facilitated by Preston, by Mrs. Gladys, by Piper, people who had lived through the transformation. Humanized hotel management isn't about being a pushover or letting employees do whatever they want, Preston explained during one of those sessions. It's about understanding that happy, valued, respected employees work better. It's about creating an environment where people want to give their best, not because they're afraid, but because they care. Mrs. Gladys shared her perspective. I worked under two types of management in this hotel, the old one where we were numbers, invisible, and the new one where we are seen, valued. The difference isn't just that I'm happier now, though I am. The difference is that before I did the bare minimum to avoid getting fired. Now I do the absolute most because I want the hotel to succeed, because I know that the hotel's success means success for me too. The visiting managers were skeptical at first. Many arrived with the mindset that this was naive idealism that wouldn't work in their hotels. But over the 2 weeks, something shifted. They saw the real numbers, a 93% occupancy rate, nearly zero employee turnover, consistent and growing profits. They talked to guests who returned year after year, not for the luxury, but for the human experience. They observed employees who genuinely loved their jobs. On the last day of each class, Silas made a point of giving a personal speech. Even at 80 years old with frail health, he never missed this opportunity. You'll go back to your hotels, he would say, and you'll face resistance. Owners who only care about immediate profit. Employees who are so hurt they won't trust you right away. Challenges that will make you question if it's worth it. He would pause, looking into each person's eyes. But I'm here to tell you it is. It's worth every difficulty, every moment of doubt, every sacrifice. Because in the end, when you look back, you won't remember the quarterly profits. You'll remember the lives you touched, the people you helped, the difference you made. And that, my friends, that's what really matters. Many managers left those speeches with tears in their eyes, and many in the months that followed sent reports of the changes they were implementing, of the positive results they were seeing. The program was so successful that it expanded. From 20 managers per class, it grew to 40. From 4 classes per year, it grew to 8. The Hotel Imperial needed to add a wing dedicated to the training center, and the impact was measurable. A survey conducted 2 years after the program's launch showed that 85% of hotels whose managers had undergone the training reported improved employee satisfaction, 78% reported better guest reviews, and 67% reported increased profits. But more important than the numbers were the stories. Like the manager of a small hotel in rural Pennsylvania, who implemented a scholarship program similar to the one at the Majestic Regency and now had 3 employees attending college. Or the manager of a hotel in Chicago, who created a mentorship system where older employees taught younger ones, fostering a sense of community. Each story was proof that the philosophy was spreading, creating ever-widening ripples. Silas Sterling followed it all with quiet pride. His health remained fragile. Some days were better than others, but he refused to slow down completely while there was still work to be done. It was during one of those tough days, when the chest pain was persistent and the fatigue heavy, that Caleb came to visit him at home. "Mr. Silas," the young manager began, "I need some advice." "Go ahead, son. I've received an offer. A major international hotel chain wants to hire me as regional director. 3 times my current salary, excellent benefits, growth opportunities." Silas studied the young man's face, seeing the confusion there. But I'm not sure I want to go. The Majestic Regency it's more than a job to me. It's where I learned everything. It's where my great-grandfather built a legacy. It's where you taught me what really matters. And what's stopping you from taking those lessons to this new company? I'm afraid that there, in a big corporation, I won't be able to hold on to those values. That I'll be forced to do things that go against what I believe. Maybe, Silas agreed, or maybe you're exactly what that company needs. Someone with solid values, who doesn't bend just because it's easier. Do you think I should accept? I think you need to do what's right for you. If you stay here only out of loyalty or fear, you'll end up resenting it. But if you stay because it's genuinely where you want to be, then stay. There's no one-size-fits-all right answer. There's the right answer for you at this moment in your life. Caleb was silent for a long moment. I think I want to stay. Not out of fear, but because there's still so much I want to do here. I want to see the training program grow even more. I want to implement new ideas I have, and I want my future kids to grow up knowing this place, knowing their great-grandfather founded it, and that I helped keep it alive. Silas smiled, a tired but genuine smile. Then that's your answer, and it's the right one. Thank you, Mr. Silas, for everything. Stop thanking me, son. You worked hard for everything you achieved. I just gave you the opportunity. The credit is yours. But as they talked, Silas felt a sharp pain in his chest, different from the usual ones. He tried to hide it, but Caleb noticed. Mr. Silas, you okay? Just a bit tired. It's normal, Silas lied, but the pain was getting worse. Caleb, unconvinced, called Meredith. Minutes later, Silas was on his way to the hospital. This time the diagnosis was clear. His heart was failing. There was no surgery that could help this time. The doctors talked about weeks, maybe months if he was lucky. How long exactly? Silas asked, with a calm that surprised even the doctors. It's hard to say precisely. It could be 3 weeks. It could be 3 months. It depends on many factors. Can I go home? Mr. Sterling, it would be better to stay here where we can monitor you. No, can I go home? Silas repeated more firmly. Silas. The doctor sighed. You can, but with palliative care, a full-time nurse, emergency equipment, yeah, that's fine. Silas Sterling came home, but not to lie down and wait, to fully live out the time he had left. His daughters wanted to cancel everything, dedicate every second to him. But Silas refused. I don't want you to stop your lives because of me. I want to see you working, laughing, living. That's what keeps me alive. So they established a routine. During the day, Meredith, Sloane, and Prudence worked at the hotel, but they took turns making short visits. At night, they had dinner together, the 4 of them, sharing stories of the day. And on weekends, Silas received visitors. Mrs. Gladys came and spent hours gossiping about the hotel, making him laugh. Mr. Otis brought fresh bread and memories of the past. Piper Carter came with her little son, who loved listening to Grandpa Silas tell stories. Preston Thorne made the several-hour trip to visit him. I came to say goodbye, he said, his voice choked. I'm not dead yet, young man, Silas joked, but there was a peaceful acceptance in his eyes. I know, but in case I can't make it back before, I wanted to thank you once more. You saved my life, not just my career, but who I am as a person. You saved yourself, Preston. I just held the door open. You chose to walk through and do the work. Still, I'll make sure everything I learned is passed on. My children will grow up knowing your story. They'll learn that true success is measured in lives touched, not money accumulated. That makes me very happy. Carmen also came, bringing flowers from her home garden. These flowers, she explained, were planted with money from the first donation our foundation received. Every year they bloom, reminding me that kindness also blooms, spreads, creates beauty where there once was only pain. That's beautiful, Silas smiled. You should write poetry. Maybe in my next chapter, she laughed, but with tears in her eyes. Thank you, Silas, for showing me that strangers can be angels when we choose to be. The weeks passed. Some days Silas felt relatively well, able to walk to the garden, receive more visitors. Other days the pain was intense and he could barely get out of bed. It was on one of those bad days that he asked his daughters to gather. I need to say a few things while I still have clarity, he began. Dad, you don't have to. I do have to, Sloane, let me talk. They sat around his bed, holding his hands. You 3 are my greatest pride. Not because you're successful or rich, but because you're good, kind, fair. Your mother would be so proud to see the women you've become. Dad. The 3 of them were crying. The hotel, when I'm no longer here, is yours. But more than the building or the business, I'm leaving you a legacy of values. Do you promise to uphold it? That you won't let greed or practicality change what we've built. We promise, they said in unison. And if someday you feel you've lost your way, remember why we started this. It wasn't about money. It was about dignity, about treating people as they deserve to be treated, about creating a small piece of the world where kindness is not weakness, but strength. We'll remember, Dad, always. There's one more thing. Silas took a deep breath, the pain clearly present. In the hotel safe, there's a sealed envelope. Only open it after I'm gone. Inside are some instructions, some surprises. Trust me. What's in it, Dad? You'll see at the right time. Now let me rest a little. I'm tired. He closed his eyes, but not to sleep. To absorb the presence of his daughters, to memorize the sound of their voices, the warmth of their hands. Because he knew with certainty that came from somewhere deep that his time was running out. 3 days later, on a quiet autumn morning, Silas Sterling rested for the last time. He was surrounded by his 3 daughters, without pain, at peace. His last words were simple. It was a good life, a really good one. And then quietly, he passed away. The funeral was massive. Hundreds of people attended. Current and former hotel employees, suppliers, guests who had become friends, students who had been impacted by his lectures, managers who had gone through the training program. The line for the wake lasted for hours. Each person had a story about how Silas had changed their lives, about small acts of kindness they never forgot, about lessons learned. Mrs. Gladys, who had worked with him for 8 years, placed a single flower on the casket. "Thank you," she whispered, "for making me feel important when the world told me I was invisible." Preston, with his wife and children by his side, did the same. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on me when I had already given up on myself." One by one they said their goodbyes, and when the casket was finally closed, there wasn't a dry eye among those present. The burial was simple, just as Silas had requested. He was laid to rest next to his wife in a quiet cemetery on the outskirts of New York City. The headstone had only his name, dates, and a phrase his daughters chose. He made a difference. After the funeral, the 3 sisters gathered at the hotel. It was time to open the mysterious envelope Silas had mentioned. With trembling hands, Meredith opened the safe and retrieved the thick envelope. Inside were several things. First, personal letters for each of them. Meredith opened hers and read aloud, "My dear Meredith, you were always my rock, the practical one, the one who kept everything running. But don't forget to live as well. Don't forget to take risks, to dream, to sometimes do things that don't make financial sense but make sense in your heart. Lead the hotel with wisdom, but also with the courage to innovate. I love you forever, Dad." Sloan read hers next. "My dear Sloan, you are always my thinker, the one who questioned, who looked for logic in everything. That is a gift, but remember that not everything that matters can be measured in numbers. Sometimes the right decision is the one your heart makes, not the spreadsheet. Trust your instincts as much as you trust your mind. I love you forever, Dad." And finally, Prudence. "My dear Prudence, you were always my artist, the one who saw beauty where others saw only function. Never lose that. The world needs more beauty, more joy, more people who care about doing things not just well, but wonderfully. Keep bringing color to gray places. I love you forever, Dad." Crying, they hugged each other. But there was more in the envelope. A document transferring a significant portion of the hotel's shares to the longest-serving employees. Mrs. Gladys, Piper, Frank, the head chef, and several others were now co-owners. He gave part of the hotel to the employees. Sloan was stunned. "Of course he did." Meredith laughed through her tears. "That's exactly the kind of thing he would do." There was also a substantial fund established to ensure the scholarship program for employees' children would continue indefinitely, and another fund for Carmen's foundation, ensuring she could keep helping cancer patients for many years to come. And finally, there was a request that once a year, on the anniversary of his passing, the hotel would host families in need for free, people going through hard times who needed a safe place, a moment of peace. "We'll do all of this," said Meredith firmly. "Every detail, exactly as he wanted. "But there's one thing I don't understand," said Prudence. "Why didn't he tell us about this before? Why leave it for later?" Sloane smiled through her tears. "Because he wanted the decision to be ours. If he told us while he was alive, we would do it out of obligation, out of love for him. This way, we do it because we choose to, because we believe in it too." "He was always clever like that," Meredith agreed. Over the following months, they implemented each of Silas's instructions. The transfer of shares to the employees was announced at an emotional meeting. Many couldn't believe it. We're owners of the hotel?" Mrs. Gladys asked, incredulous. "Partially," Meredith explained. "The three of us still hold the majority of shares, but you now have a real voice. Profit sharing. Major decisions need your approval too." "He did this because he believed this hotel belongs to everyone who works in it," Sloane added, "not just those with their names on paper. The first time the hotel housed families in need as part of Silas's memorial program was transformative. 5 families, all going through tough times, unemployment, illness, natural disasters, received a full week at the hotel. The impact wasn't just on the hosted families. Employees volunteered to go the extra mile, ensuring each family had the best possible experience. Regular guests, upon learning about the program, many offered to pay for the meals of families in need. "This is what your father created," Caleb said to the sisters, watching it all unfold. "Not just a hotel, but a movement, a different way of seeing the world." And he was right. Silas's impact kept growing even after his passing. The training program expanded further. The Majestic Regency's model was studied at universities. Books were written about his philosophy. But more important than any formal recognition were the small changes happening in hotels across the United States. Managers treating employees with more respect, owners investing in team well-being, humanized policies being implemented one company at a time. Preston, who now had 8 hotels under his management, created an annual award called the Silas Sterling Award for the employee who best exemplified the values of dedication and compassion. The winner received a full scholarship for any course they desired. Carmen, with the fund established by Silas, expanded her foundation to 3 states. Thousands of cancer patients were helped annually. Everyone touched by Silas was spreading his lessons. And so, even though he was gone, his influence grew. 2 years after Silas's passing, on what would have been his 82nd birthday, the Majestic Regency held a special celebration. Not one of mourning, but of celebrating a life well lived and a legacy that continued on. Meredith, now official CEO of the hotel, gave an emotional speech. "My father always said success isn't about how much money you have, but about how many lives you touch. Looking around this room today, seeing all the people here, all the stories of change and growth I know by that measure, my father was the most successful man who ever lived." The audience applauded. Among them were not just employees and friends, but people from all over the United States whose lives had been changed directly or indirectly by Silas. "But the greatest tribute we can give him," Meredith continued, "isn't applause or tears. It's to continue the work. It's to spread kindness where we find cruelty. It's to choose compassion over greed. It's to remember every day that every person we meet carries invisible struggles and deserves gentleness." "My father may be gone," she concluded, her voice breaking, "but his philosophy lives on, in each of us, in every decision we make, in every life we touch. And as long as we keep living those values, he never truly left." The celebration continued through the night. Stories were shared, tears mixed with laughter, and in every corner of the hall, Silas's spirit seemed present. Caleb, talking with a group of new managers who had gone through the training program, shared his favorite memory. "I once asked Mr. Silas what he thought his greatest success was. I expected him to say the hotel, or the training program, or some professional achievement. But you know what he answered?" "What?" the managers asked. He said, "My greatest success was the day I convinced a housekeeper crying in the hallway that she mattered. She was about to give up on everything, thinking her life had no value. I spent half an hour talking to her, listening, showing that someone cared. 3 years later, she came to thank me. She said that day saved her life, that she was now in college, chasing her dreams. That, more than any profit or award, is real success. That was the kind of man he was, Caleb concluded. Someone who understood that the greatest impact comes from the small, personal, human moments. As the night wore on and the celebration gradually broke up, the three sisters were left alone in the empty hall. "I miss him," said Prudence simply. "Me too," agreed Sloane. "Every day. But he left so much of himself here." Meredith looked around the hall, the hotel, everything it represented. "Sometimes I feel like he's still here, guiding us." "Do you think we did the right thing?" asked Sloane. "That we're honoring his legacy properly?" "Look around," Meredith replied. "You see happy employees, satisfied guests, lives being changed. If that's not honoring his legacy, I don't know what is." "He'd be proud," agreed Prudence, "not just of what we've done with the hotel, but of the people we've become in the process." And it was true. In the years since Silas's passing, his daughters had grown not just as professionals, but as human beings. They had learned that true leadership is service, that real power comes from empowering others, that success means more when it's shared. The majestic Regency continued to thrive. The occupancy rate stayed above 90%. Awards kept coming. But what truly mattered were the stories. Stories of employees who managed to buy their first homes, of employees' children who graduated from college, of guests who found hope in dark moments, of managers who completely changed how they treated their teams after going through the training program. Each story was a living testament that Silas's philosophy wasn't just naive idealism. It was a viable, sustainable, and deeply impactful way of doing business. Years passed. Meredith got married and had children who grew up running through the hotel corridors, learning from an early age the values their grandfather had planted. Sloane developed a microcredit program for employees who wanted to start their own businesses on the side. Prudence opened a culinary school that offered full scholarships to young people from underprivileged communities. The legacy continued to expand, branching out, touching lives in ways Silas could never have imagined. And on a quiet night, 10 years after Silas's passing, Meredith was alone in the office that had been his, doing paperwork. On the wall, there was a framed photo. Silas, with his worn-out straw hat and apron stained with dirt, smiling that tired but genuine smile, surrounded by hotel employees. All smiling, all genuinely happy. "We made it, Dad," Meredith whispered to the photo. "We kept what you built, and more than that, we expanded it. Your kindness keeps spreading, creating ever larger ripples." And at that moment, alone in the silent office, Meredith could have sworn she felt a presence, not frightening, but comforting. As if her father were there, placing a proud hand on her shoulder, saying without words that she had done well. The majestic Regency is still operating to this day. It remains a place where people are valued over profits, where kindness is not seen as weakness, but as strength, where the legacy of an old countryman who was humiliated but chose to respond with grace instead of vengeance lives on. And in every room cleaned with care, in every meal prepared with love, in every guest treated like family, the spirit of Silas Sterling remains present, reminding everyone that true success is measured not in money accumulated, but in lives touched. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story of resilience and kindness? Do you believe it's possible to do business with compassion? Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.